Good evening and welcome to Speakers Corner UK channel. Tonight we're going to be doing, as you can see, part 3 of our review of EFDawah reviewing Answering Atheists. And with me as always, Stop Spamming. Good evening, sir.
Hey, good evening. And I hope it's the last part of this one.
Let's see, we're at an hour 54 and it finishes at 3 hours. So we might just stop it after a while here. I'm not sure we're going to get through another hour and 20 minutes. Good evening to everybody who's joining us, who's listening in. So as you remember from the previous one, I went onto this EFDawah stream for however long it was, 40 minutes or whatever, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, probably about 40 minutes, give or take. And when I wanted to get onto I think the meatiest one for me of all was the morality, they decided they'd had enough of speaking to me. So what we're going to do now is just see the last 10 seconds of me there, or 5 seconds or whatever, when I'm leaving. They'll then obviously be able to discuss between themselves what I said without any response from me, which is always interesting. And then we'll go into whoever joins them next. I actually can't remember who it was, so we'll see what happens after this. So Stops, anything you want to say before we get going?
No, fine.
Alrighty, let's get straight on into it. Let's bring it up here, and here we go.
I'm going to come on your show.
Okay.
All the best, Rob. You take care. We'll
Take
speak
care, Rob.
soon.
Ta-da.
So I just
No,
want
not
to
explaining evolution.
very briefly summarize this. So
Evolution, all of a sudden now he's not expert. Come on.
this is fascinating. So what Rob actually said in his answer was that you'd bring science to bear and you would look for natural explanations until you ran out of natural explanations. And then he's saying, the positing is actually, then you could say there was something that beyond what we understand. But that's all you could say. You would have to read.
Okay, so just a correction on that, or in addition to that, if you like, whichever. I'm saying that if something violated the laws of physics or did something in a way that was, to all intents and purposes, non-natural or, quote, supernatural, then I wouldn't still be necessarily looking for a naturalistic answer. In other words, if in fact people could pray and have arms regrown, or people could raise from the dead under prayer, or certain people did it, even if people did it in general, or it happened occasionally, I'm going to go, okay, that's quite possibly, I'm going to be moved in that direction. I'm going to be specifically moved if it in fact is involved with a particular religion and it happens reliably. Then I'm going to be moved in that direction. Other people might not. They may say, I'm always going to look for a naturalistic explanation, and I'll never accept supernatural. I'm not of that view. I know that there might be some atheists like that. That's not my position. So, critique my position. You can disagree with it, but I'm not sure that you're actually having a disagreement. All you're saying is that you don't like it, or it's uncomfortable, or it's disagreeable for you, but without any substance as far as I can hear.
Address your theories. You'd have to, look at actually my theory of how this particular thing happens must be wrong because there's an observation I can explain. And you would adjust your theory. You really wouldn't actually go to a supernatural as an explanation, because science, the basic fundamental of science is there are no non-natural explanations.
Yeah, so Imran, can I just comment very quickly? So for example, at the moment, quantum physics, if you look at quantum physics, it literally looks like magic. It does, right? Obviously, we're not saying it is magic, but we're just saying that,
No, quantum physics doesn't look like magic. It only looks like magic to people who are uneducated. Those who understand it, and granted there aren't that many, they have a fair understanding of it. So it's not magic. And quantum mechanics is a much more difficult thing. A much easier thing, like I say, is regeneration of an arm, or somebody literally rising from the dead after 3 days when the body's gone into decay and suddenly changes. In other words, like a superhuman ability. And it happens, like I say, in line with some prayers or a reliable religious ritual. That's going to sway me in that direction, especially if I could test it on myself or a loved one, or whatever the case may be. So appealing to quantum mechanics is a false equivalence in my view, and mostly because you're ignorant and so am I of quantum mechanics. So it seems like to the lay person that it's magic, but in fact there are people who understand it, and they're getting better and better at understanding it.
2 particles on either side of the universe, 14.3 billion light years across. And if one is agitated, effectively...
Well, that's not as far as I know what it says anyway, that it's 14.3 billion light years. We'd have to look at specifically, because I take a bass with a pinch of salt. Whatever he says, I think we need to look up very closely. In my experience in the past, when I've had a look at his claims, I find that they don't represent what people are actually saying. So I think we can take this with a pinch of salt. And if you're listening and you want to look it up quickly, what's it called, stops with the 2 particles? There's a term for it.
Coupling.
Quantum superposition, is it?
It's a couple pair.
yeah, whatever the term is.
Well, you have
I don't think it's.
You have tunneling. It depends
Yeah.
what you're trying to say. But this Abbas is a total idiot. He doesn't. Sorry, he's completely ignorant when it comes to anything, because he gives out this number of 13.8 or 14 billion or something, which is in the which is in the direction of the past. It is not that this is the size of the universe across. He seems to think so. He does,
Yeah. No, I think what he's saying, though, if you listen to their stops,
anything.
I think what he's saying is not the size of the universe, but more the particles that are 14 billion years apart. Like quantum superposition. I think that's what he's saying. But
on either side of the universe.
well, obviously nobody's been on the other side of the universe to test that, right? So again, that would be a speculative claim.
They don't understand it. They simply do not understand what they are talking about. What you said is something completely different. They seem to think that there's reality and there is nature, and then there's some sort of a wall, and then when you jump over this, that there's like a totally different area there, which is the supernatural, which actually exists, and there's like another, a mirror image of reality. This is the impression that I get when I listen to them. That, just as we have life here, then there's death, and then you have an afterlife, which is a reflection of what we have here in life. And this is the kind of picture that they seem to have of natural and supernatural. They don't understand. As soon as science is able to say that we don't understand it, and then goes and says, oh, hang on, now we understand what it is. It was just supernatural to us. But now that we understand it, it is no longer supernatural. It is then natural. They don't understand this. The same as they don't, like a lot of people don't understand, if you see a UFO, it's exactly that. It's unidentified. It doesn't mean it's automatically aliens. You need to understand this.
Yeah.
The other one is immediately affected, okay? Now, obviously, science is trying to find out how a 14.3 billion light year distance is traversed instantaneously, okay? Or how particles appear from what appears to be nothing and disappear.
No, they have got good ideas on why that's the case. That's the quantum vacuum that does that. So it's not like, there's still some mysteries there, but it's not a complete mystery like you make out. But I think the underlying point here that he's trying to make is, hey, there's these things that appear supernatural. Nobody's claimed this. Nobody's claimed that the quantum mechanics or virtual particles are supernatural. And to me, there's a difference between those ideas and somebody resurrecting, or somebody regrowing a limb, or indeed somebody splitting the moon and putting it back together again. That would violate everything that we understand about physics. And if that were to happen, that's not an equivocation with quantum mechanics or any of these other sort of more complex ideas that nobody thinks are supernatural, apart from you or other people that don't understand it very well.
Now, is science going to, say, after 10 years of investigation of quantum physics, and there's no answers to these riddles, or let's say 100 years after there are no answers to this riddle, will science then suddenly concede, maybe, you know what, this might be supernatural? Or will...
No, science won't concede that unless something supernatural happens that matches what I've talked about, or some version of that. So if we don't have an answer, we don't have an answer. But in fact, if a supernatural answer came about, in my view, that could be tested in principle. Other people will disagree with me. But what you guys want to do is exclude science from any claim that happens in the natural world, so you can hold on to your supernatural claims and miracles, pat yourselves on the back and think that you're justified in believing them, when in fact you don't have a justification.
Will science actually say, oh, we don't know, we're going to keep investigating? The reality is science is never going to arrive at a situation where it's going to posit, oh, you know what, we've hit a brick wall, it must be God, this proves God, it must be God, or this is supernatural. It's never going to happen. So this nonsense about, science will, somehow be able to discover the supernatural or accept the supernatural, it's never going to happen, clearly.
Yeah. Even if let's start with the assumption God does exist, a miracle.
We've answered that, so I'm not going to speak on it again. It's pointless.
Has occurred, and a scientist or a group of scientists, we'll go for the resurrection example that we were speaking about, were there at the time looking at it. They could come up with other hypotheticals, even if it was a supernatural event. So they could say, oh, well, maybe there's some sort of alien species, and they've injected him with some sort of next level serum we don't understand, and that's revitalizing his atoms or his cells and blah 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 blah. You can constantly put these hypotheticals on. Because of the human condition, you're burdened with ignorance in a lot of matters. You have a finite scope. You have a lack of complete information. We're not God. We're not all knowing. And science is basically like walking through fog and doing your best to kind of feel around the objects and explain what's going on while being impaired. And it does a very good job at that task, at trying to explain things to them.
Well, why giving an analogy like it's blind and you're trying to work things out? What better methodology can you come up with for, quote, fumbling around in the dark or in the fog? Presumably, hopefully, it's not faith or eyewitness testimony, which we know is incredibly unreliable.
I don't have enough forehead left. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy how people living in the 21st century can knowingly and willfully sort of deflect everything to make it sound as though they're making sense. This is absolutely crazy. If you go and you have an explanation for something, like I can go and of course I can say, no, science is wrong, lightning is actually produced by Zeus. The explanation that we have, the natural explanation based on natural causes, phenomena and things that we simply can explain, is just one possibility, but it could be that it's actually Zeus trying to cheat us, trying to make it appear as though there are natural causes for all this, but in actual fact it's Zeus. Of course I can do that, but is that realistic?
Everybody's going to have their own prior starting point, and other people will not accept that. They'll be the ultimate skeptics. But these guys are trying to at least strawman my position. And other people, if other people said that, great. Well, that's fine. That's not my position.
But they're trying to obfuscate this. They're just trying to, cast doubt into something and try, like he says, put, this thing of fog around it, so that you're actually just sort of looking around blindly, trying to discover things. What an utter nonsense!
The best of the ability of a being with the condition of being finite and ignorant in many things. But it's not offering absolute things, in the sense that there isn't always, there is always, hypotheticals that you can bring up, which are a consequence of our being finite, the consequences of our limited capacities, and that there are always being blind spots. There's always these epistemological issues that we've got to constantly deal with. And if obviously you can take advantage of that, even if it is the case that it was a supernatural event, that the cause was God, and all of this was to occur. The axioms, the presuppositions made in the scientific endeavor are pragmatic. They help get things done. And this is why I think Tom Screen ends up talking about truth being kind of pragmatic. And you have to kind of move towards this in the philosophy of science, because of the issue of our finitude, because of the issue of the problems that we have to face as humans.
He hasn't really said anything. He's just repeated himself a couple of times and said basically what Imran was saying in different words.
And what people need to appreciate, science is like a hammer. Okay, it's a tool. So if you go and look at a hammer, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to clean your windows using a hammer, it simply does not work because it's not designed to do that. So if you go and you say, well, the hammer is limited, well, yeah, the hammer is limited because it's supposed to do only one thing, and that is hammer nails into something, whatever. But you can't say that now. Science is limited because it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and that is it's teaching us, it's showing us, it's telling us, it's explaining to us what is happening in the natural world. Of course, it's not going to go and find God because God is not natural. So science has not been designed for that. You cannot go and say, well, the hammer can't clean a window, therefore the hammer is useless. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'm sort of, at least at the moment, of the view that if we had a perfect understanding of science, in other words, if we knew everything there was to know within this universe, then science could quickly and easily show the natural from the supernatural, because we'd have a full understanding of the entire laws, the entire governing of this entire universe. And if something happened that violated that, we would immediately see that's supernatural. But that's a hypothetical where it seems to me there's nothing in principle that prevents us from doing it. It's just our infallibility and lack of knowledge of the greater universe. But if we did have that down to the understanding at the highest possible level that any being could have within the universe, and there was nothing that we didn't know about the universe, then that it would be so obvious, so easy for that to happen. Something happens, it violates everything that not just we understand, but that we know to the highest degree possible, and we say, okay, that's supernatural, right? And that's the position I'm taking, but it doesn't have to be absolute. I'm of the view that something could be supernatural if it violates the laws of physics.
And
we've got, go on.
No, sorry, I thought you were finished.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. And what we have to understand is, if somebody says it's impossible for anything to transcend the laws of physics, well, that merely means that we don't have all the laws of physics. It doesn't mean that the set that we have today is complete and this is all there is.
Yeah, well, then somebody else is using those words in a different way to me, and then we'd have to see if we can come to an understanding on whether we agree on certain words. For me, I think something can, quote, violate, I don't know about transcend, I don't know quite what that means necessarily, but violate the laws of physics. So if it was whatever the law of physics is, and it was violated in such a way that we could demonstrate that's the case, and it was coupled to something that reliably worked, like Islamic prayer, for example, or whatever it is, then I'm going to be persuaded in that direction. Is that immediately going to tell me Allah's there? No, but I'm going to go like, okay, something's happening. And especially if I could test it myself, or have a trusted member that I'm aware of go under this test, and I'm there and I'm observing it, I'm going to be pushed in that direction. I'm going to go, okay, here's something that reliably happens. This seems to me to be supernatural. But I'm not claiming absolute certainty, but at some point we've got to make a decision. Other people can be skeptical and say, no, this could be aliens trying to fool us. Well, okay, they're entitled to that position. That's not the position I take, right? So these guys are arguing not my position, they're arguing somebody else's. That's fine, they can do that. But if they want to critique me, they have to show that there's a logical contradiction, or I'm being in some way unreasonable, and they haven't remotely done that.
And the other problem is that's what I see here. They've just shown themselves how science 20 years ago, when nobody had any clue what these phenomena were, this what we call quantum mechanics today, nobody knew what was going on. So for them, this was supernatural. And then when they started investigating, more and more facts came up, and now, I mean, what is a CCD? CCDs, the charge-coupled devices in cameras, for example, are nothing but quantum mechanics at work. So it's not only that we understand more of this, but we're actually able to use it. And a few years ago, 100 years ago, this was like it was a god. It was totally supernatural. And this is what happens in science. Suddenly you start investigating, you start finding out the causes, the reasons, everything behind it, and then you can start using it. There you go. They've brought it up themselves.
It's quite funny though. Sorry. I was going to say, but I thought it was quite funny that the example that this guy that Rob's been reading about brings a Christian example, and it just supports what you're saying, Ben. That they're responding to Christian claims.
Oh, what a silly remark.
That's
I'm responding
stupid.
to the principle of supernatural. It doesn't matter what it is. I could have chosen Allah splitting the moon, or riding on a winged animal, or something like that. That would be a supernatural event as well, in my view. So it doesn't matter. I mean, that's like a completely superfluous.
He's heard it
like
from a Christian, so does that make it wrong?
Yeah, a trivial thing. He's missing that I'm bringing up a principle. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's the principle.
Exactly.
The resurrection and all this. You're in a room full of Muslims, you talk
me
about resurrected Jesus. It's like, what?
So it reminded me of Speaker's Corner with when Sabor talked to him, because when he got to a certain point, he would just say philosopher names as if that's evidence. Yeah.
Oh, you have a problem when I quote people. When Sabur does it regularly as a tactic, well, then somehow it's okay, is it? Please be consistent, Ben. Sabur does this all the time. Claims, cherry picks philosophers, quote mine certain things they say, then stops an eye and other people go look it up, and we find it's either half true or completely false, or taken out of context, because you guys like context, don't you? So if you bother to listen to or go and look at what Sabur is quoting, you would find the same thing. But somehow that's okay. When I appeal to people and tell you what they think and tell you why I agree with them, somehow that's a problem. I think you need to be consistent here. Or tell me what the error is that I'm in fact doing. If I'm appealing to, I'm not just appealing to somebody and say, hey, somebody says it, therefore it's true. I'm telling you what they say and why I believe it. And I went through an explanation for it. What's the problem?
So that philosopher said that. So there. Can you explain what that means?
He's only read a couple of books and not
It's the
quite
same
finished
thing.
them. He's calling all these guys. He haven't read their books. He just sort of read them.
Hello,
If you could
Whereas I
Rob.
believe the book we read all their books.
Rob, can you
Oh, is he
wait a
the
second?
legend? From
Which one?
the Sabor?
Just a quick one, actually. I was quite disappointed. So on my lunch break, I didn't have a lot of time today because I wanted to watch his stream, reviewing like Hamza's stream. And his, I honestly thought he would come on a different person, because in that stream he was really calm. It was stop spamming. That was all like laughing, taking the mick, and being quite laddish. And I thought Rob would come on with some decorum and talk like he did in that stream.
Did I not have decorum? What was it that I did that was, quote, not decorum?
Can you hear what I'm saying?
Sorry, I didn't hear previously. Did you say something previously? I missed you there.
Yeah, I tried to stop you.
Sorry, my
because
apologies. Go on.
what is happening? What I wanted to say is they seem to be under the impression if somebody like Sabur comes and talks back at you, that he is now refuting you. It doesn't matter what he says. And this is a misconception that I see quite frequently with Muslim apologists, that any time somebody says something, they take it as a refutation. It doesn't matter what to say. This is exactly
and
what
if
I
I
see here, that Subur said something, and because he said something, he refuted you. No, he didn't.
Correct. And I've tried this many times, right? And I could have tried on this and say to, hey guys, this one that you quote think he's schooled, rinsed, whatever, childish terms you want to use. What was it, do you think he was his strongest argument that I haven't responded to, either at the park or afterwards in a refutation video? What was the strongest point? And see if any of them could even remotely repeat it, let alone make an argument in favor of it. I've tried this with many people, and I get a blank, right? Maybe they'd say something, but I doubt they would even have something substantial to actually respond with. But somehow, as you say, the fact that he talked a lot and not everything was refuted on the spot, somehow that's rinsing or schooling. Okay, well, if that's your case, then anybody can babble anything, right? I can bring a quantum physicist on you to just screw with all of you. You wouldn't have any coherent response, and I can just say that he schooled a lot of you. And in fact, afterwards, you go and look him up, and you find that everything he said is true. The difference is we went to look up, so when we found it was either half true or completely false. So that's the difference. So I expect a school teacher, quote unquote, to use your term, to be somebody who's accurate, and when you go and look it up, and you in fact find that what they're saying, in fact, is accurate, proper, and summarized correctly.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go for it.
Oh, okay. Because every time I try something, you start again.
Sorry.
I forgot what I wanted to say. Oh, the same thing is he mentioned me, but he never said what it is that I said that he finds laddish or something. It's quite weird that they throw names around and they think just because they mention somebody, they've now refuted them. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a different approach, right? I mean, you've been doing this a lot longer. Your patience is a lot thinner, perhaps, than mine. You've heard the same sort of bad arguments regularly, and you're not quite as charitable. And sometimes that's a useful approach, but somehow when you do that, or, you express your opinion, somehow that's incorrect. But when Hamza and these other guys do it, well, that's entirely fair, right? Presumably. I think there's a double standard that if somebody objective from a different viewpoint, let's say Christianity, Hindu, looked at this objectively, I think they'd see there's a double standard going on here.
To be fair,
I was really disappointed, to be honest. Sorry, I'm only the host. I'm not, you know what I mean? I was just a bit. It was a bit of a shame, really. I thought we were gonna have a good discussion.
to be fair, it's very different.
Okay, so did we not have a good discussion? And if we didn't, Ben, what was it that was not good for you? You see, these are the questions. If I were there, I'd be asking him. And at that point, I'm pretty certain we wouldn't get any substantial response. He has some sort of feeling in there, or I responded with more passion, or I was talking loud, or whatever, shivering a bit at the car outside, that I had a different, quote, demeanor. But how is that not a good discussion? You see, a lot of this is just subjective, how I feel about things. But when you ask people, and I see this such a lot, and I'm sure you do, stops, people give their opinions on something. When you challenge it, or you go, okay, why do you believe that? What was it specifically about X or Y? At that point, suddenly they're on the back foot because they made a claim that they haven't really got good reasons or any reasons for, and this feeling they've sort of garnered that is entirely subjective and unsubstantiated, and then you expose it by asking specifically what it was, and at that point you don't really get you barely get a coherent response, let alone a substantial one.
Rob, do you remember a guy when we were talking about Sharia, and then there was a guy, this Boma guy, who called in and said, well, I heard what you said last week about Sharia and it was wrong. And then I said, okay, interesting, great. What was wrong? Well, I don't remember that. But he said it was wrong.
Yeah, I think if you're going to say something's wrong, then at least tell us what's wrong and why you think so. Because the important part is obviously what you think is wrong, partly, but the more important part is why you think it's wrong. That's the bit that we're going to have a discussion on.
Difficult,
Well,
because
well, you know what I mean?
But also, I mean, if you look at, for example, Imran, you posed a very good question to Rob there about how would science explain a naturalistic process when in the middle an intervention of a supernatural event took place. And Yusuf...
Okay, well, that's not the question he actually asked. He asked the question, does science presuppose the supernatural? That's the question he asked. He didn't ask, hey, it's a natural process and you inject supernatural in the middle. And I objected to the grammar of the question, and I explained why. So at least represent the question that he asked accurately. I would appreciate that.
Established also that very same point, that how would you be able to disprove something that looks like it actually flows, for example, right? And he simply started going to Lucy. He didn't answer he didn't address the question at all. He didn't reply to what you said. Completely ignored, sidelined what you said.
Does anybody remember, what did he say that I supposedly sidelined? I don't want to be accused of sidelining something.
This is absolute rubbish. No,
I mean,
total
somebody can go
nonsense.
back and look at part 2 or whenever it was and tell me if there's something I sidelined or missed, then tell me about it. I'm happy to answer it. I don't want to be accused of being sidelined. But remember that Imran had a long monologue that my own fault, I suppose, allowed him to drone on for long. And then, there's multiple points made, and I can only respond to 1 or 2 before people jump in. So if there's something that he said that I didn't respond to specifically, anybody has a look and you can type it out, I'll answer it now. It's not a problem. I don't want to sideline something. I'll give you the best answer I have at the time, with whatever I know, or say I don't know. So, again, if you're going to say I sidelined it, then be specific, because I'm still not sure. Something about flow. What does that mean? Give me specifically what I sidelined or what I didn't answer. And if we go back, we'll likely find that it was in the middle of a long monologue where I'm trying to listen in and hone in on what I think is the important bits to deal with. If these guys made 1 point and allowed me to respond, then I will. I'm not going to sidestep things.
I didn't hear anything like that either.
Is this Lissa in the comment? Is this Atheist?
Should we get Brother Hatim one, because he's been waiting for a while?
Yeah, let Hatim come in, actually.
No, it's fine. You guys can talk to Alyssa. I was just here. I was trying to do like T Jump's position a bit of justice. I've watched a lot of his videos, and I know a little bit about his epistemology. But you guys can talk about Alyssa first if you want.
Is Lessa an atheist, though? Is Lessa an atheist?
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, well, answer that question. That's no.
Thank you for this stream, brothers. And I just have like a comment on this subject. I just want to talk about the reference, because if we have like to justify or criticize any theory or argument or any idea, we need a reference to to be a basic, that we start from. So like the example of Descartes, when he tried to doubt everything, and at the end he couldn't doubt his mind. So he has a reference. So that's why we say that I think.
Thank you.
I am.
Bye.
So,
this is meaningless. This is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess what she's trying to say is that we need to start with some foundation, and she's pointing to Descartes' thing, which is fine. But I mean, I think we're all past that. We all presuppose that we exist. There's some sort of reality, whether it's idealism, materialism, or naturalism, or something else out there. So while it's an interesting, philosophical term, I don't think a lot of us burn any fuel wondering whether, in fact, we are brains in vats or anything else like that.
Yeah. Plus, they said 50 million times, this is for atheists. This is only for atheists. If you're a Muslim, don't come on here. And this stupid wench comes on here. Assalamu alaikum. I just want to. I mean, you were told 15 million times, don't come here on the stream. This is for atheists. And the Muslim comes on there. I mean,
I don't know if it was this stream or it was Hamza's stream, but I do remember them saying it. I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, but they're in the same. They're in exactly the same boat. So bringing this up as if it's like a point to against one or other view is obviously not the case. So it doesn't matter bringing it up, because if you're going to bring it up as a critique against non-believers, for example, the same thing applies to you. So yes, it's a philosophical thing that's been around since Descartes, etc. But what relevance does it have to this conversation? Maybe she'll tell us now. I don't know.
So thinking about saying about there's no God or there's no creator, we're gonna be in a situation without a reference to start with. If we're just gonna be our reference just gonna be doubt, then we're gonna go insane, because we're gonna doubt in anything.
Okay, no,
this is
that's a profound
argument. Just
no. This is well, I mean, this is a profound misunderstanding. Or a very poor claim, right? Yeah. That if you don't start with God, well, I think a term was you're going to
Can't
go
get
insane,
anywhere.
whatever the case may be. Everybody starts from that position of doubting it, because in order to understand God, you've got to presuppose your rational faculties. And so, because if you didn't presuppose that what you were hearing or understanding was a rational message from a God, then you'd consider yourself mad. So we're all starting from the position of accepting there's an external world. We have rational faculties, the reliability of our memories, and a lot of these presuppositions that you can't really get away from. Even though the Christian presuppositionists try their best, I think we've seen, those of us that have listened into those and communicated with a few of those people, that's just vacuous claims, right? They can't get anywhere. These guys don't even understand that the presuppositional approach, apart from Imran, but very, very weakly. I mean, he's no good at it. He's tried it once or twice, but he doesn't really understand it either. But you're in the same boat. So trying to presuppose a God doesn't get you out of Descartes' evil demon.
And by the way, I've had people commenting on this, and they're saying, yeah, but you're spending a lot of time on Hamza and EFDawah. And I said, don't you understand what we're doing? We're not looking at the person here. What I'm doing in my stream, what I'm doing now in my videos, this is personal. There I'm addressing what Hamza is saying on a one-to-one basis. But here, we are looking only at the principles. We're only looking at the concepts. We're trying to understand what the reasons are, not what the person is saying. I'm not interested in the person. That's totally ludicrous.
Yeah,
I don't know
I agree
why
with
people
you.
don't see the difference.
I think it's the ideas, but these guys, fortunately or unfortunately, depends how you look at it, seem to have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and so they have some level of influence, rightly or wrongly, over a great many people. And so it is the ideas, but it's how they articulate them and where they, certainly in my view, and stops is where they're going wrong. So, I mean, if there's other people and you want us to review other videos, no problem with that. We can do that. But we're familiar with them. We've spoken to these guys, and like I say, they've got their ideas, and they seem to influence.
You've been rinsed by Subur. That's why you hate Subur, and that's why you're now anti all these people. This is the whole thing, and this is that's not it. I couldn't care less about the people. It's the concept I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that's the same when I was in Speaker's Corner, right? It's the ideas here, and what I am, less than pleased with is when people have been explained these by people far smarter than me, and explained it in such a way that they don't have a refutation or even any substantial rebuttal, and they come back repeating themselves as if they've not heard anything, not learnt anything, or they think they've got a strong argument. This is either willful ignorance, or it really is an inability to comprehend anything that you don't already believe, in which case you're pretty dogmatic.
It's careless. They don't really care about these things as long as it sounds good.
Or if it's science, the science is changeable. We can't make it as a reference. It change every time. Like we have like a new theory or a new thing, Also, if we say that our reference is nature, then even atheists talked about the beginning of life. Then if there is a beginning, there is an end. So nature is changeable too. It's not like a stable thing that we can start from. So yeah, that's what was my comment.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
I think we'll just move on.
I think the other thing here, and it's important, and I raised it with Rob, and Rob obviously didn't want to go down there, which is that before you even get to evolution, you need to first come to an understanding of how this universe came into existence in the first place.
No, you don't.
But I think we're repeating ourselves from the previous part, but for those people who didn't hear us,
from this.
Whether the universe had a beginning or it was past eternal doesn't necessarily influence whether evolution, as in common descent, is true, because there are theists, and obviously not these guys, or at least they weren't going to respond to my question directly. Not one of them said yes or no, apart from Abbas, who said they were created magic, God brought them into existence and they had no ancestors. So he sort of somewhat committed himself, but none of them would say no, that's the case. But I was going to go somewhere with that now. With the universe, yeah, there we go. But whether the universe was created or not, there's theists that take the view that God got the universe started, and that common descent is the mechanism by which he is a diversified life on Earth, right? However he got it started, obviously that would have been that could have been a quote naturalistic start, right? He lights the fire of the universe, for want of a better word. Everything runs through this, what appears to all its creatures to be a naturalistic process. And so that process, you could still have a God, that created the universe and evolution be true in some theist view. Obviously not mine, but some theists, and they don't feel like it's incompatible. So we don't have to go back to the beginning of the universe. I could grant you the universe at the beginning. That's not going to make a difference to whether common descent is true, unless you're going to take the position that if the universe had a beginning from a God, then evolution is false. But now you need to demonstrate that. And if you're going to appeal to the Quran, obviously I'm not going to accept that. And I'm going to point you to people like Francis Collins, Ken Miller, and various other Christians who do believe that God got the universe started, but, uses evolution as his tool to diversify life.
Because getting bogged down in evolution, and then Rob says he's not an expert on evolution, yet he's made that his main argument.
No, and I was clear. What I was talking about is common descent and whether that falsifies the idea of certain theistic books. This is a very straightforward idea, and I don't need to go into depth about the mechanisms of evolution. So again, you have a misunderstanding. I was very clear multiple times. I repeated myself almost, it seemed like ad nauseum about this point, and I don't need to go into debate whether natural selection is the main driving force or not. I don't even need it. If it is the main driving force, and that can be shown, and that still seems to be the overwhelming view, then that makes it even worse for you guys. But I don't even need to go to that higher level. I'll leave that to people like Aaron Ra and other people who understand a lot better than I do, or Jerry Coyne, for example, who wrote the book Why Evolution is True.
In order to disprove a creator, and I just think it's putting the cart before the horse. Quite frankly,
It surprises me that nobody can steel man my position. Either they don't understand it, or they're unwilling to steel man my position. At no point did I say that evolution falsifies a God. I said that common descent, the main view of evolution, is that it falsifies certain theistic gods where the claim is that God created Adam and Eve without a common ancestor. This is, I think a child can understand. The fact that Abbas cannot reliably repeat my objection is, I'll leave it out there to the safekeeping of the audience what the possible reason for that could be.
Yeah. So red pens.
What do you think, Hamza, that Rob meant when you said? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think he meant? 'Cause I've never heard an atheist. You said that your reasons were, I think you said logical and irrational, and he said you're playing lowball.
He said logic is
I
lowball.
thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, for an atheist, I've never heard. So what is next? I think, I don't know. I'd like to have heard him expand on that bit.
Did I not expand in the thing? Did I not explain that?
I think you did. Yeah, you said it's the most basic thing that you need. This is where you start.
I'm again, because there was a lot of talking, maybe they don't remember. I think I was quite clear that if you're going to say, hey, well, my views are totally logical, all I'm saying is, well, that's a trivially low starting point. We all expect that, unless we can show a contradiction in your starting point. But I take it that they start from a logical position, unless during the conversation I can show it. I don't start with the position that every interlocutor is illogical off the bat. But like I say, that's a low bar. We all start there. So patting yourself on the back that your views are logical is like you're barely on the first rung of the ladder, and you've got to climb all the way to the top, and you're patting yourself on the back that you got on the first step of the ladder. It's not a great achievement. Everybody starts there. So that's why I was sort of dumbfounded that he thought that this was somehow an achievement, and some 18-year-old from where was it? Not Cambridge or Oxford, Eton, I think he said, confirmed it as if like an appeal to an 18-year-old authority is somehow vindication that he's got something amazing there. That's just almost nobody debates whether your views are logical unless there's a contradiction that's shown straight off the bat there. So we all take it so it's like me saying, do you know what, it's fantastic that I can breathe air before I have this conversation. Well, I wouldn't be having it if I didn't. Trivially, every single human on the earth breathes air before they open their mouth to have a conversation. It's like a trivial point. There's no substance to it. It's completely uninteresting.
You said a good guy to answer. I mean, it's logical.
To be fair, I think I think what he meant was that like something could seem coherent, but still be wrong. Like for example, like I don't know, like flat Earth theory or something like that. It seems coherent, but it can still be wrong. I think that's what he meant by logical.
Yes.
But
So
I'm just trying to be charitable here.
Yeah, no. Basically, in logic, you can have you've got a distinction between sound and valid. So
Okay, so he understands this. Now let's listen in.
argument can be valid, but it doesn't follow just because it's valid that it's true. In order for it to be true, it also has to be sound. So basically, like you can, if you make an argument, premise 1, premise 2, therefore the conclusion, if the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows, which means that it's a valid argument. But that's based on the assumption that the premises are true, and it could still be logical based on those assumptions. But the issue is, well, are the premises true? And then once you've gone into that, you've not only confirmed the validity of the argument, i.e., its logical structure, but also the soundness of the argument. So
Correct. Okay, so he's got that pretty much spot on. That's good enough for me. That's entirely fine what he's just said there. But Hamza's going, hey, the part where I start is like that I'm starting before the validity even. Like validity is normally in an argument is taken to be pretty much a case as well. It's very, I won't say very rare with lay people, but very rare with more sophisticated people that the validity of the argument is brought into question. It's almost always we're talking about the soundness. So most people who have thought about it will have a logical or a valid sort of argument, but the soundness is always the thing that we are challenging. Very, very rarely it's the validity. So like I say, that's a low bar. If that's like your starting point, that you say, hey, I've got rationality to make a valid argument, it's like, that's what I'm questioning. I'm saying, why even bring that up? It's, everybody's got that pretty much. So don't pat yourself on the back. Get to the next level. Now you've got something to talk about of interest.
I think that's what he was referring to. But I don't think, I don't know, maybe it was a bit of a confusion in what you were saying.
I
think he's being charitable. Hamza just didn't understand that, right? So, and again, I want to, where credit is credit's due, he represented me accurately and he understood that particular topic that we were talking about there. And he accurately, if I was there, I would have said, yes, Yusuf, I would have said the same thing. That to me, then he can take that as a good point, because now I've agreed that what he said accurately represents pretty much what I was saying. He used different words, but it's entirely fine.
3 words usually. I say logical, rational, reasonable.
Okay, that's the problem, right? As soon as you do that, you are using equivocation. The reasonable is where it goes towards soundness. Reasonable has got nothing to do with validity. That's logical, right? So when you conflate all of them together and then think you've made a point, no, you haven't. We've got to split those apart. That's why I say Hamza is like a bull in a china shop. The nuance isn't there. And when you split those things apart, you actually look at them in different views. He wants to put them all together and run with them. And I'm not going to allow that. And I'm going to point out why. It's not just that I'm not going to allow it. It's a conflation. It's a logical fallacy to conflate all of those together and then run with it.
Is he saying they are all the same? Because this is my sequence that I normally use. Do you think he's actually making this as one of the same?
Yeah, he's putting them all together and trying to run with them. So what he's saying is, in effect, what he's saying is, my arguments are valid and sound. That's essentially because the reasonableness goes towards the soundness of it.
Yeah,
How sound
okay,
is something?
this is what I'm asking. Is he showing a sequence, or is he showing like the same level? Is this for him all the same level?
Yeah, I think this is all the same level for he equates these to be all the same thing. I know you don't, and most people who understand it don't.
I'm taking this as a sequence. For me,
Yeah.
Is the process itself is for me is the highest level, because then you've already taken care of the previous steps.
Yes, the reasonableness is what we're always going to question, and that will be around the soundness. That will relate to the soundness of the argument. So we take validity or rationality to be, a given, unless there's a straightforward contradiction there. We're going to take that as, yes, that makes sense. That logically follows one from the other. Great. Now let's see whether it's in fact sound. But he's conflating the two.
Put in between rational as well.
What would you say then? What was your one?
I put in between rational. This is why I was so shocked when Hijab tried to put rational and reasonable or reason into the same ballpark, and I don't agree with that. I always go, okay, is it logical? In other words, is it formal? Does it fulfill some formal requirements? And then I go, is it rational? In other words, are the premises and everything based on something that you can expect to be true outside of emotions and looking at different possibilities and options? If you've established that, and then I go and say, okay, is the whole thing now, the whole package now reasonable? Does it make sense?
Yeah, but there's a distinction there. Okay, so now I hear what you're saying. There's a distinction between reason and reasonable. And Hijab went to the word reason, which basically is synonymous with rationality, essentially, or close enough. But that there's a big difference between using reason, i.e. rationality, and being reasonable. That's a different category. But the words are so similar that one can easily think, they mean the same, but in my view, they don't. somebody was asking what's a Red Bull in a China shop. It's not a Red Bull, it's a bull in a China shop, which means somebody goes into a delicate area and they just smash through it, you know, without taking care. And that's what Hamza does, puts a lot of things together and just wants to bulldoze through without nuance. And let's discover whether these words are in fact synonymous, because he conflates the two together. So he goes, hey, it's all logical. Hey guys, it's logical, reasonable, rational. He suddenly conflates the other two together, and he's not permitted to do that. The only thing we're going to grant him, if we do grant it, is that he's logical. But like I say, that's a low bar. That's trivial for me. I don't have a problem with something like that. But then to add in reasonable, no. You don't get to bag that question. That part you can't bring in.
Yeah.
And I think if your position is based upon those three terms, then no one can come and say that your position is a false position.
Yeah. So,
well, that again depends what you mean by.
Him?
Okay, let's listen in. Yeah, I was going to just say there quickly. Well, you can't say nobody's going to refute your position because somebody could. You could, in fact, be demonstrated to be unreasonable. You think you're reasonable, and something comes along. So people who thought that the universe was static and eternal prior to Edwin Hubble, they would have been entirely reasonable at that stage. That was the best information they had. At that stage, they were entirely reasonable. After Edwin Hubble, anybody who says that the universe is static and eternal would be unreasonable. So somebody could be reasonable and later on shown to be unreasonable. So of course somebody can refute you. All you're saying is that there's a high probability or some level of probability that you feel that your argument is sound. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be refuted.
So you believe your argument is sound because the premise is...
Sorry.
Rob, just a second. Rational and logical, in my eyes, are not synonymous.
Yeah, I'm not going to nitpick over them too much. But go ahead. Yeah, what do you think?
Because this is in the chat. And logical is just a way of looking at the formalistic way something is presented, whether it makes sense, whether it's internally consistent. But rational means that you're looking at different options, that you're looking away from emotions. You're trying to assess a situation, not using your feelings or anything, but only the facts. And then looking at the different options, looking at the different possibilities, and then coming to a conclusion. That is what rationality is about.
Yeah, I suppose I'd be kind of similar. I'd use slightly different words in that logical applies to the laws of logic. So if something is logical, we take it that it doesn't violate one of the three laws of logic. To be rational, you then use the laws of logic and you make inferences, and that you follow a logical sequence, and that would mean that you are rational. So you're now invoking your logic, and you're using logic as a tool, and that method that when you use logic as a tool, that's what I would call rationality. So rationality is your logic is your hammer, and then when you're hitting the nail into the wall, that would be rationality. That would be kind of a very bland, off the cuff type of analogy to use. So I agree they are actually different. Sometimes I conflate them, and I shouldn't really. But in my head, I'm going, something is logical as long as it doesn't violate one of the three laws of logic, and then somebody is rational if they follow the laws of logic in terms of its ultimate inferences and outcomes. So somebody who says, okay, I accept the laws of logic, fine, then they're being logical. But then if they say, well, this doesn't follow from that, when it clearly does, and there isn't, it's a deductive argument, then they'd be irrational. So when he talked about his belief, he doesn't want to impose his belief, and I explained, and I went through a logical sequence there. It didn't violate the laws of logic, and one necessarily followed from the other. To deny that would mean that you're irrational. Not that you're illogical, but you're irrational, because you're accepting the laws of logic, but you are being irrational because you're not following, the inference one step to another, if you like.
You believe to be true, and so if they are true, based on whatever the reality is, then the conclusion necessarily follows. So you think your argument is valid, and you also think that it's sound. The difference, obviously, is that he might even agree that it's valid. And he might say that it's logical if these premises are true, but then he could argue against the truth of.
Yeah, of course.
That's the point, right? I'm always going to argue against the soundness. It's rare that sometimes, obviously, if you make an invalid, statement or whatever the case is, I'll point that out. But I'm most often going to argue against the soundness, not the validity.
Whole point.
But Hamza can't.
Yeah, but I think that's what he was alluding to. But
sorry.
And Hamza can't shut up. He can't. He simply can't take it.
I think that the problem with that, with Rob there, he sounded quite anxious. And it's completely normal, especially if you're like one person on a stream with like how many of us are there here? 6, 7?
Well, it wasn't so much that I was anxious about it. Like I say, I was shivering because I was quite cold in the car, but also I'm getting different people, so I want to stay on a train of thought. And when somebody like Imran or Abbas goes off, hey, let's talk about the universe, or hey, let's talk about this other thing, the underpinnings of science, when we're talking about something where we all accept, the basic underpinnings of science, and now you want to bring it into question, those for me are red herrings. And at that stage, I am going to sort of push back against it. So it wasn't like I was anxious per se, but I'm trying to stay focused when we've got 5 people who want to have, 4 people mostly, that want to try and jump in. And that's the problem with a big panel. And you and I talked about the stops, where somebody will ask a question and take the conversation off in a different direction. And I'm, say, speaking to Hamza, or I'm speaking to Yusuf, and Abbas or Imran come in and they want to ask like about the universe. I'm like, that is a red herring. Now you're going off in a different territory. I'm going down this road.
So I think that maybe anxiety was playing a bit on that, and like we were trying to all speak to him. We're not trying to like intimidate him in doing that, but like when someone said something interesting, I did it at some point. I was like, I felt compelled to try to squeeze it and get my point across. And you have to be sort of overly competitive with all the other people on the stream in order to get yourself in.
See, this is what I appreciate by him, right? I'm not on there to say this, and he's kind of saying this, so he's being charitable there. And again, when somebody is, in my view, charitable, honest, reasonable, whatever the case is, I'm quite happy to point that out. It's not a critique of every single thing that every one of these guys say. But when they do say something that we don't agree with, that's the part that we hear. That's the part we're here with. If you don't hear me necessarily saying, hey, that was wonderful every time, it's because it's an accepted thing. It's a trivial point. But I do appreciate that he's saying this at this moment when I wasn't there. So he's, doing his best to, I guess, represent me. Yeah. Or represent the position there, and that's decent.
But when you're alone and you've come onto a stream like as the only atheist versus several theists, you can obviously be a bit anxious for one, and it can feel like people are ganging up on you. But I think it's usually just a misunderstanding of the fact that we're trying to compete with each other to be able to get our thoughts out when we hear something, because we're constantly worried that if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget, or the conversation's going to move on. And I'm not going to have been able to make this absolutely killer point. So I'm trying to like squeeze in, you're trying to squeeze in.
I don't actually have a problem with that, and I understand that point as well, because you can easily forget unless you quickly write down a note or whatever the case is. But then I think the big thing is to stay on. You've got to be on the same road. I'm walking with somebody along a road. You've got to be coming up as part of the group that's walking along, and don't suddenly go off into the long grass and then start to shout from the long grass that we need to go in that direction. That's the main thing. So stay on the topic. That's okay.
And then it kind of gets a bit hectic there. And if you're on your own, it's very easy to perceive it as an attack.
One thing I said, though, Yusuf, that thing I said about a claim and a belief being separate, different things. A claim is obviously asserting something. A belief is just a statement of what I believe.
Yeah. It sounded like you were thinking that he meant that this was some sort of force or something.
No. Basically, if I said to him, God exists, is that not a claim?
It is a claim, yeah.
And if I say I believe God exists, is that a claim?
It's a belief claim, so it's still a claim.
Thank you. At least he said it, right?
Look at Hamza. Look at his face.
At least Yusuf will say what he believes and understands, whether he agrees or disagrees. And I think we heard it in the other part, or at least we might hear it here. He'll say at some point, hey, I think I take a different view to you guys, and he'll go da 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 da. And I appreciate that. Whether he agrees, it's not because he's agreeing with me or whatever the case is. I appreciate somebody taking a different view. You and I do it sometimes, stops as well. And I think that's what intellectually honest people do. If we have a difference, just because we're atheists doesn't mean we agree on everything. And I think one of the things that I'm noticing with Yusuf, at least in this conversation, is that even that he's in there with all these other guys, he's prepared to say, hey, this is what I believe on, here's X, Y, and Z. And I could disagree with him on many things, obviously. But I think at least on this point, it's a belief claim, right? One is an epistemic claim, one is an ontological claim. And once Hamza, maybe Yusuf could teach Hamza about that, and then he wouldn't conflate the two and get sort of confused between them. Once you understand those two categories, then it's not so difficult to get confused.
And this is correct. It would be a shame, but remember, Yusuf is also a Muslim apologist. Exactly, this is what I'm referring to. So he then suddenly backpedaled because Rob said, listen, why don't we have a convo? And suddenly he said, no, I'm too busy.
Well, I mean, I heard that he was moving house, and he put something out on Twitter that he's battling at the moment. So I'm going to take it charitably. that he isn't. And I said to him something like, when you've dealt with whatever is going on for you, maybe we can have a chat. And he said, God willing. So I'm going to leave it at that, and maybe at some point in the future we can have that conversation. Maybe
That would be interesting. I agree.
Yeah. And maybe it'll be, a bit anxious for him to come on the Gin and Tonic show by himself. I think he's quite a new convert, so we can do it here. We can do it on a neutral place, or we can do it on Discord. He can come on mine or somewhere else where we can all have that conversation. It doesn't have to be recorded if he's concerned about that. I'm not there to make anybody look foolish. However, if somebody is willfully ignorant, or somebody a bit like Hamza is condescending, then I am going to go in there and sort of cut that down to size a little bit, because I don't appreciate that. But somebody like this, I could sit and have a conversation with all day, right? Because he's
but the problem
at least comes
is,
from.
Rob,
go on.
The problem now, Rob, is that we are burnt. Okay, we're marked. There's a stigma attached to us. So I think politically correct group members of EFDawah are not going to come on the Gin and Tonic, because they simply fear that there's going to be too much backlash from inside.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case as well. And Hamza said it himself. His words were, he's been told by other more knowledgeable brothers about Gin and Tonic or whatever, or about you, or whatever the case is, right? So he's doing what he's being told without actually investigating it. And that's obviously a point that I'll always raise with these guys. What is an attack or an Islamophobe or hate or whatever? And we'll go into the long grass there. And of course, they won't accept it, but I'll quickly expose why, that's just a, slippery slope / black hole fallacy, and I can invoke the same. And if they're intellectually honest and consistent, it would mean that I could brand them exactly the same thing. I don't do that, neither do you. Most people don't do this, but I see it with, and again, it's not all people on this panel, but I do see this with some Muslim apologists, and they think this is a way out. And all it does is allow them, it looks like to anybody who's watching, it allows them to sort of escape out of a back door when they don't want to have to speak to somebody. So it is what it is.
But it's not a claim upon him, is it?
But it's not absolute knowledge, and it's not necessarily a claim upon him.
Yeah, I'm not asserting. I think the word is asserting it on him.
Oh, you're trying to force him to.
No, if I say God,
No, he doesn't get it.
I don't know if Yusuf's going to repeat that part. I think that was important part, and he still hasn't got that.
No.
It's not like you're forcing it at a gun to my head, but there's what's called, I'm sure there's a philosophical term for it, but there's a overt inference that if all of these presuppositions are true, that we're rational, that we care about the true, we're supposed to be convinced by, good reasons and evidence. I'm open about it. I think you are too. I expect people to change their mind if I've presented a good reason. And if I say I believe X, I think I've got good reasons for it. And I think that if you care about what's true and you're convinced by good reasons, you should change your mind. So I'm clear about that. But to try and hide behind this, I just don't see the point. I think probably because he just doesn't understand it. Because he's obviously a strong character. So, but for some, it just seems like inconsistent for him to say, no, I'm not trying to put my belief on you. Well, it's not like you're trying to put it on with a hammer, but there's an inference there that I should believe what you believe. And the fact that you don't realize this, because I don't know why you would deny it. It seems odd to me. I think it's only because you don't understand it. That's the only reason you would deny it. But let's see if Yusuf, I can't remember if he does. Let's see.
this to somebody, that means I'm telling them as a fact God exists.
Yeah.
If I say I believe God exists, it's got nothing to do with them.
No, it doesn't. But we do have, separate to that claim, like personally anyway, I have a desire for other people to become Muslim.
No, but you're fine.
Yeah. So I think that's all he was alluding to. That making that claim, it doesn't follow from that we're trying to force everyone to become. And unrelated to that claim, we do have this separate desire for people to seek truth. Okay,
but I think there's something that is missing. It's not unrelated. What's related directly to that claim is those other inferences, which I spelt out when I spoke to them. And if you accept all of those inferences, and so does the other person, then it is related directly to your claim. And you would expect me, if you gave good reasons, for me to be convinced and go, do you know what? That's a good argument. I am convinced, or I'm likely to be convinced.
So the whole point of Dawah is that we want to go out.
Rob, just 1 second, because I saw the comment by TDS. The problem here, you need to know the history. Hamza always made huge mistakes with belief and proof and knowledge and things like that. So one day, Sarah sat him down and said, look, this is what belief is. And if you want to believe something, you can believe anything that you want. You just simply need to be convinced by something to believe it, but there doesn't need to be any evidence for your belief. Now, this is what he remembers, but he doesn't understand that this is for him personally. As soon as he goes out and he tells other people, I believe that, I don't know, Kennedy was assassinated by the Russians or something, then he is making a claim. Even if he is personally convinced of something and he doesn't talk about it, then it's cool. But as soon as you go out and you say this and you try and convince, even if you don't try and convince other people, you are still opening up to being criticized for what is your claim. And he doesn't understand that if he says something out loud to other people, this is the same thing as making a claim. It's not making a claim and saying, I am stating that this and this is the case. No, it's you're just implying something. And this is the point that he needs to understand.
But if it is TDS Day that he's, doesn't want to do the burden of proof, then I'm not sure what his game is here, because he's quite happy to get other people to do it, and on some occasions he seems like he's trying to do that. So I just wonder whether it's just not understanding it. But I'd actually go further than what Stop said, right? And I'm being convinced by Ozymandias and a couple of other people that if you have a belief and it's brought to your attention and you contemplate on it, you should, if it's important to you and you're an intellectually honest, you should look for reasons to see whether you have warrant to hold that belief, because I'm sure we all have beliefs that we've somehow been convinced of, but we're not sure why we were convinced. And if it was brought to our attention, hey, you believe X, why do you believe X? And we kind of like, sort of stunned that we don't have an answer. At that point, I think there is as Ozzy calls it, a warrant for yourself to go, why do I believe this? Can I find reasons, or should I withhold that belief, or should I dismiss the belief, or whatever? But as you say, then as soon as you go out, the warrant becomes much stronger almost, because the warrant for yourself might be much lower than the warrant for somebody else. And so that's when the burden of proof kicks in. And because you've accepted it, like he's accepted the universe must have had a beginning, and he's given what he thinks is warrant for himself, as soon as he communicates that out to other people, the rest of us go, whoa, no. You are completely unwarranted to believe that. You should be undecided. That's the position you should take. So he thinks he's got a warrant, but other people don't. And I think, so there is those two levels, but you should have some warrant for a belief, at least according to Ozzy. And I think that is if we are aware of what the belief is.
Agreed. But like I say, it's not an assertion, is it, of my belief?
It is.
No, if by assertion you mean like an attempt to force someone
to claim it's true.
Hang on a minute. What? Do you not think the only question you have to ask Hamza at this point is, do you think your belief is true? He's going to go yes, and that completely refutes exactly what you've just said there. Of course you're going to tell people your belief is true. You're going to believe it, and you're going to want other people to believe it too if they're rational. I mean,
Rob, he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand it.
You claim to believe it's true.
No, I believe it. That's what I'm saying here.
So if
an atheist says to me, for example, if an atheist says to me, I don't believe God exists, that's not him telling me God doesn't exist. That's just him telling me he doesn't believe God exists.
Okay, but that infers that there's an ontological state of the affairs that he's epistemically. Yeah. I think we've gone over this multiple times. Otherwise, I'm flogging a dead horse here.
Which isn't an issue for me.
Yeah, and you can both hold.
But if he comes to me and says God doesn't exist, then he's asserting it upon me that I'm crazy for believing in a God.
Not necessarily.
No,
no, it's not crazy. I mean, it depends what you mean by crazy. There could well be an inference that you're unreasonable for believing it. I'm quite happy to say that you are, and all of you guys are unreasonable for believing Allah exists. Got no qualms saying that, and then I could give you my reasons why. Not a problem. But it depends what you mean by some of the other words you use, and we've got to ask, well, what do you mean by X? Right, the same as what I asked him in the beginning. What do you mean by this or that? Right? I need to hear what he means to see whether I agree with it so we can move forward, or whether we have to discuss that to come to an agreed meaning on a particular topic or word, because I know it's going to be important later. I'm not going to go, what do you mean by X on every single word, but experience has told me there's certain words that I need to ask somebody, what do you mean by X? So that I can either agree with that and we can move forward, and I can hear them say it and they hear themselves say it so that we agree, or we have to review whatever the particular word is or definition they're talking about.
But then I wonder, now Yusuf understands this. Why is he a Muslim?
Well, that's a good question, right? That's the sort of thing I would ask him, right? So, because this is just sort of basic rational ideas, if you like. It's the sort of foundation of, I guess, rational thinking.
There must be a cutoff somewhere.
Well, I'd love to ask him. So that would definitely be something. Yusuf, walk me through your process. What were you before? How did you come to this? And
That'd
we
be
can hear
fascinating. Exactly.
we hear the story, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've heard Hamza's, right? And immediately he started off with an argument from ignorance or an argument from personal incredulity. I couldn't, literally, he said basically these words: I couldn't see how the universe didn't have a cause. Therefore, it must have had a cause, and now I'm looking for that cause, and the best explanation I could come to in my very limited, because he never studied any cosmology, and he still hasn't, is that it must have been a creator. So that's a complete argument from ignorance. So he's sort of out of the game, but it's a good example of somebody who comes to a belief or comes to a conclusion without good warrant, thinking to themselves that they've been warranted, but when you expose it, you find that it's without warrant.
And this is the interesting thing. If
you
you,
can-
ask
you can
somebody
make-
like Jordan M, for example, you ask him, okay, do you need a God? He didn't know. He didn't have an answer. But if you ask Hamza the same question, do you need a God? The answer will definitely be yes. Otherwise, how can the universe be here? So he is like a presuppositionalist in this sense that he can't see how there cannot be a God.
Yeah, which is strange, right? Because he's spoken to myself and Skydive Phil and other people about this, and we've presented to him many other options that how the universe either could have began,
Yeah, but
even
you're
from a
not
naturalistic
certain.
point of view.
This is
Or-
just a theory.
Yeah, but he's not certain either. And if he claims yes, that's the
He
part that I'm
is.
looking for. And when I hear that, of course, that's when I can critique it, right? And we have done in the past.
That claim. So, like, let's say
But the
someone-
atheist making that claim on me. If an atheist comes to me and says God doesn't exist,
if he makes an absolute claim, he's still, even if he says that he knows this and blah 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 blah. I would still put it on him, even though he's not using the words belief. That it's still a belief,
no,
despite.
the burden is upon him, though, isn't it?
Should we get a new guest on?
Let's get a new guest on.
Well, I agree with this. Yes, there is a burden. If an atheist comes along to you and says, hey, I believe Allah does not exist, I've got a burden. I don't mind to start discharging that. Most people are very scared of discharging a burden because for two reasons. A, they don't think the reasons are good enough, or they're scared that it might be critiqued and rebutted or refuted. And B, I think the bigger thing almost is certainly what I've seen in my anecdotal experience is that some atheists don't want to have to defend atheism. They want to challenge theism or religion or Islam, whichever one you want to take. And the moment they're asked about theirs, it takes the spotlight away from the critique that they want to bring. And so they want to get away from that as quickly as possible and get back to critiquing Islam. Now, it depends on the conversation, right? If you come onto Gin and Tonic and you're going to ask us about atheism, we're not going to talk about that necessarily, unless you come on there and say, hey, I've got a counter to it. Here's why it's illogical or irrational or whatever. But if you come onto the Gin and Tonic, we're expecting you to defend Islam. If I come onto answering atheism, I'm expecting to answer the questions that atheists would answer. I'm not going to challenge them on Islam unless they bring up something. The moment they open the door and say, hey, well, you've got, like Imran did in the very first part, right? Hey, you need a mind, and a particular mind, for objective morality. Now I'm going to challenge that, because now he's opened the door to his theistic view. And this is where I think they play hide the ball. They are opening the door to their theistic view, but saying, no, we didn't talk about God, we didn't talk about Allah. Again, all we have to do is ask one or two questions. We get to Allah like in two questions. So they are saying it, they're just not saying it openly and in my view, honestly. And they're trying to keep it high level with some generic God so that they don't have to, as you point out, have to defend Islam. But the whole foundation is based on that. So it's very hard, if not impossible. And they thought that Imran did it without appealing to Allah. Of course he didn't. He just used words, the higher level version of Allah. And that's what Hamza does as well. Some God. Well, what God? Your God. You're not going to tell me that it's the Hindu God or Yahweh. You're going to tell me it's Allah. So why call it a God? I think, to me, this is disingenuous. Just call it Allah. That's what you believe. You do not believe any other God exists. And by impossibility of the contrary, in your view. If Allah exists, no other God can exist, because he's the one and only. That's what your book tells you. So why would you ever talk about any other God? Just talk about Allah. And if an atheist comes to you and says, hey, evolution refutes God, you should be charitable enough to go, no, it doesn't do it. Or yes, hey, if common descent is true, then the Quran, aka from Allah, is false. But no, for some reason they want to dance around this and avoid this. And I think that's disingenuous personally.
Well, I just want to establish that this thing. I'll put it to bed.
So we got Preston from Speaker's Corner, I think it is.
Yes, hello, gentlemen. Hello, Abbas. Hello, Imran. Pleasure to see you and hear from you.
Okay, so I know Preston. He's not an atheist. I'm not entirely sure what he is. I think he's kind of, to use the word, when I've used to speak to him a little bit on Veli Vision's channel, He's some kind of spiritualist. I think maybe an African spiritualist. I'm not sure. Again, I don't know what spiritual is, so don't. I'm just repeating what I remember him to be. Hopefully, I'm doing it so accurately. So he's not an atheist, not a Christian, but he does talk to them a lot. I think he's overly charitable, though, and I think we might see a little bit of that here.
Hey, man.
And Jordan M, Hamza, and Yusuf. I won't take up too much of your time because I'm not a full-blooded atheist. As Abbas and Imran know, I've been on a journey trying to find the truth. And I just wanted to pose a question, which you guys might have already addressed in my strange experiences with debates with atheists. I've tried to find out their criteria for believing in things. So I asked them simple things like, you acknowledge that we have consciousness. You acknowledge that we have dreams. You cannot see consciousness. You cannot see dreams. What is the criteria that you utilized to believe in that human beings have dreams and that human beings have consciousness? Because you cannot see it. You cannot touch it.
Yeah.
Even if you put a human being under an MRI scan, you cannot see their dreams. The best thing
No, that's true. You can't see their dreams in the sense of see what they see, but you can correlate certain brain activity with what they report. So why do we believe it? Because we have a, quote, first-person experience of it. That's why we believe it.
And it's no longer true. Somebody has now come up with a, I don't know if it's a kind of a head cover or whatever. They have now combined, they're able to combine EEG and MRT, and therefore, MRI and EEG, and are therefore able to now correlate this and actually have found a way to describe the pictures that somebody is thinking of in the brain.
Okay, so we're making progress on this. And again, in principle, if it forms part of the natural, I don't see at this stage an impediment to us eventually, doing something like some of the sci-fi pictures where you plug somebody in and literally it shows on a computer screen what they are dreaming and you see the physical pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, we're 1,000 miles away from that, but I don't see it being impossible in principle unless somebody says, hey, here's the contradiction that prevents that from happening. And look, I was listening the other day to a podcast that's pretty high level on these sort of things, and some of the topics that were being talked about, even for me, was like, okay, this is really complex stuff. Once you get deep into the woods, and I was just listening as a layperson to a philosopher talking about these different ideas, and especially about consciousness, I was like, okay, because he was of the view that materialism reduces to idealism with regards to consciousness, and he gave an argument that I wouldn't be able to accurately articulate here to you. I'd have to take some time to even understand it fully. And I was like, okay, that opened my mind. I'm like, oh, okay, there's a lot more to this than virtually any of us are aware, right? And even the philosophers disagree on this. So it's a very complex and deep topic, and nobody's got the definitive answer.
Sorry, you can do is probably see brain activity. But I can't see Hamza's dream. I can't see Abbas's dream or Imran's dream. I can't view Jordan's consciousness. Yet they believe that consciousness exists and that dreams exist. What is the criteria that the atheists are using to believe in that? Every time I ask them that question, they can never give me a straightforward answer because
the criteria. So what do you mean by criteria? I guess, why do I believe it? Is that what you mean? Well, in that case, because I have an experience of it. Can I demonstrate it to others? Well, me personally, by using words, no, but as you pointed out, technology seemingly is getting there, in which case I will then come back from a dream or whatever the case is, and tell you about it. As regards consciousness, I can't justify consciousness. All I can say is that I'm presupposing it, in my view, to the impossibility of the contrary, because if I was not conscious, then what would this mean? But can I demonstrate, can I prove it without being circular? No, I can't, but I wouldn't attempt to do that. Now you go back to, almost back to Descartes, right? But that's a problem for everybody. So when you ask that question, I think I've given you an answer. If you're going to try and ask me to justify it, I'm going to say no. But then I'm going to turn the question to you and say, well, how do you do this? Right? And you're going to, if you know what you're talking about, you're going to be in exactly the same boat.
But the thing that you need to do is you need to differentiate again between the concept and the contents. Yes, you can show the concept. You can measure using an EEG. You can measure the alpha waves. You can do all these things, and you can actually go and show when somebody is doing what. Absolutely, yes. So my criteria for the contents of a dream absolutely does not exist. Totally. I mean, that's ridiculous. But the fact that we are, yes, my criteria is I can demonstrate it.
Okay, and again, he'll ask you for the evidence, and you could go that route as you just talked about, right?
I can show him. Yeah.
Feel the need to say, oh, well, the scientists have proven that dreams and consciousness exist. But I'm like, well, hold on a minute. When you were a teenager or when you were a young adult, you didn't need a scientist to tell you that you had consciousness. You didn't need a scientist to tell you that you could dream. So what was it that they used to believe in those things? And they never seem to want to give me a straight answer. They kind of think it's a trap. Maybe it is. I don't know.
It's a stupid question.
The problem.
I think I've given an answer. I mean, maybe I've got given a simplistic answer. I'm not sure what else he's looking for. See, if I'm speaking to him, going like, what else are you looking for? Are you looking for a justification?
It's a stupid question. Really.
What specifically? Go on.
What can you do? I mean, if I'm 3 years old, obviously I don't wonder about the facts of masturbation or something, because it's not something that is relevant to me in that time of my life. The same thing if you're a young person, you probably don't really think about these things. It's only later on that you start, contemplating, hang on, I've never thought about that. What happened? And that is the way that we learn. This is the development, the human development of the brain. So when I'm 12 or 13, I don't have those thoughts. So this is a stupid question to ask, well, how come when you were 12 you didn't know about this, and then when you're 25 you suddenly do? Well, that's exactly
No, I think he said that you're kind of aware of your consciousness, and you didn't need it proved to you, and now people are saying scientists have proved it. Well, I'm not saying scientists proved it, so it depends on who you're speaking to, and I'd be interested in the proof. So if Stopp says, yeah, science has proved consciousness, then that could, potentially he'll have an argument for it. But I'm just not sure what. So with somebody like Preston who says, I never heard a good answer, I'm going to go, okay, what specifically are you looking for? Give me an example of something. What's your criteria, so I can see whether I've got something that meets that? Because to me, it's not a difficulty explaining it. Can I justify it? No, if that's what you're asking for. But then I'm going to ask you the same thing. How do you justify it? And all you're going to do is a circular argument or a vacuous appeal, a vacuous claim that you can't demonstrate. We're all in the same boat here. So this sort of critique against atheism is like a weak one. I mean, there are better critiques than this that you could level against, quote, atheism, depending which atheist you're speaking to. But I don't think this is particularly one of them. Or if it is, you haven't articulated it in such a way that it sort of puzzles me in any particular way.
The problem is, have you heard about the hard problem of consciousness?
No, I have not. No.
That's going to be the kind of revealing of where this issue lies. So the hard problem of consciousness is this issue of consciousness seems to escape being reduced to simply being material processes. And there's a massive issue trying to prove that, and it's basically because consciousness is quite a subjective experience. And so, like, for example, if science can't tell us what it's like to be a bat, but we know that there are experiences of being a bat. Like you have bats, they're floating about there, they appear to be conscious, and they must be having experiences. Now you can if science were to take the bat and break it down into absolutely every possible way that science is able to, no matter what it tells you about its atomic structure, what it tells you about its patterns of behavior, any of that, it can never reveal to you what it's like to be a bat. And this kind of highlights the issue of how consciousness seems to elude the scientific process. I
mean, obviously Chambers, the famous Australian philosopher who coined this term, has sort of some view on that. Daniel Dennett, who's kind of his equal, denies that there's this hard problem, right? So it depends which philosopher you speak to, and actually these are very deep topics for us lay people. They are, we can talk simplistically and sort of, I think, quite ignorantly about them to some degree, but once you get into the realm of philosophy, which is what you're trying to touch here, philosophy of mind, it's a real minefield, and there is no conclusive evidence of this, right? So I think that's still unanswered, at least in philosophy. And again, if science has got an answer to this, then I'm happy to go with that. I'll take science over philosophy if it's got a highly reliable and repeatable conclusion. Then I'm going to take that. I'm not claiming it's absolute, but I'm going to sway in that direction, which is why I'm not concerned. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Or maybe I have a misunderstanding. I don't think so, but I could be, about this infinite regress, right? I do not see that as a problem, whereas these guys seem to see that. They just outright assert that the infinite regress is a problem because you couldn't get to now. And I'm looking at the cosmologists and the theoretical physicists, and they do not have a problem with it. In fact, I've got something from Sean Carroll on that particular point. I listened to Roger Penrose. I sent you an article today. They believe in past eternal and infinite universes in the past. and they're on the cutting edge of this. So I'm going to be swayed in their direction rather than old philosophical terms from thousands of years ago when people didn't understand the world anywhere near as well as we do now.
But there's a very easy example that you can always bring up, which is if you put a dot on a child's, head, on the forehead, there is an age sort of cutoff, as from when a child or a toddler will realize it's him or it or her, it's the toddler who has the red dot on the forehead, whereas before they don't realize that if you put them in front of a mirror. And this is how you show consciousness on a very, very, sort of high
self-awareness, you mean?
level. Yeah.
Okay.
If I would really recommend, there's quite a lot to say about it, but there's probably some articles on Plato Stanford website. But if you just search "hard problem of consciousness,"
yeah, you're going into a
No,
minefield.
you
I
can't
don't
go
think
there.
any of
That's
us are
crazy.
really
Yeah.
equipped to do that.
No.
That's best left to people that are quite learned. On the surface, it might sound easy, but when you go down there, what a
No.
minefield.
This is
I'm
why I
gonna-
say there are three areas where we have the gaps. One is the origin of universe, origin of life, origin of consciousness. Those are the three gaps we definitely have.
There's a lot of really, really interesting things that go into it, and it does kind of open up into a few different avenues. And it's the reason they're probably getting uncomfortable is because of this problem, and science just is incapable of dealing with it. And so it goes from completely denying that the problem even exists, which, as far as I can tell, is just completely absurd.
No, it's not. Some people deny that there's a problem. Daniel Dennett is one of them. There's others as well. So, no, it's not absurd. Again, I encourage you to read. I've only scratched the surface of it, but
Yeah.
to make the claim that it's absolute nonsense when the topic is far more nuanced and difficult to understand with different terms, I think is a little bit premature.
Agreed.
to all the way kind of moving towards this idea of panpsychism, or trying to claim that the whole universe is conscious and things like that. There's a lot of varying
When they say the whole universe is conscious, I listened to something the other day, and it's basically that consciousness pervades the universe, whatever that means. And it's not and I'm not going to dismiss it outright. I haven't heard any strong argument in its favor, but it's not like a woo-woo term, even though it might sound like it's certainly not in philosophy anyway. It's a serious sort of field of discussion, for want of a better word, and I'm not that familiar with it. But that's one option, right? And if that is the case, well, then obviously that answers the question, right? So there are multiple answers that could be the case out there, but your one is that God just magically gave it to you. Well, okay, but that seems like kind of ad hoc to me. God can do anything, right? It doesn't really explain anything, which again goes to the God of the gaps, and they hate when you say that, but that's what it sounds like. But to them, because they already believe it, it just makes so much sense. Why would you even question? I mean, it's just so straightforwardly obvious, like EFDawah. I mean, this is so obvious. Everything's complex because my sock is not as complex as the mobile phone. Therefore, the universe must be much more complex and it must have a creator. I mean, it's so stupidly obvious. How could you deny it? But when you have, and I'm not saying these guys have an EFDawah mindset, but when you have that sort of mindset, you've got to be very careful that you don't just take it as being the case because you're already, very much lean in that direction.
Responses to it. It's really interesting, and I think if that subject is something you want to look into, that you should definitely read more on the hard problem of consciousness, and you'll probably start to see where these issues arise and why people react the way they do when you're dealing with them and asking them questions.
Okay, and that was basically it. I will continue my journey. I'm still reading the Quran. I'm using tafsirs because it's not very easy to understand.
We should invite Preston onto Gin and Tonic, and he can be devil's advocate if he likes or whatever, or give us his understanding. And I think if he does it with people like us, he'll find that it's not as straightforward as these guys think, and most Muslims either haven't read it or don't understand it. And I would hope that when he comes away from it, he goes, nah, this couldn't be right, especially with the claims that, God has sent this, clear, concise message to all of mankind. That's really the bigger claim that seems to be easy to refute when you look at the book itself. And that's why I invite people to come on the show and read it with us and see if they can make sense of it. And I guarantee you that they're going to have to appeal to the tafsirs, the scholars, somebody else to try and make sense of it. And that's not what you would expect from a God. So keep reading, Preston, but you're welcome to come on the Gin and Tonic, and let's see if you come away with any better understanding without appealing to other man-made sources.
The Quran without tafsirs, but then I don't know if I'm looking at the right scholar
There you
for
go.
tafsir. But it's been,
But doesn't that ring a bell, Preston? Ring an alarm, right? That you have to do that when God is supposed to be sending this to you. And we can trivially easily imagine how much better God could have done this had he wanted to, rather than going through fallible men that disagree with each other in an ambiguous book that's repetitive, contains errors, and doesn't really tell us a great deal about reality, if anything, right, according to Stops. So it depends with how far you go with it. But that should be ringing alarm bells already, especially if you read certain surahs that claim that it's a clear, concise book. Right? That's, if it said, hey, I'm a vague book and you guys have got to work it out and puzzle it and I'll tell you at the end, okay, that would match it, that sort of a claim. Then you go, yeah, that's kind of what the book is. It's, difficult to understand. You can take any hidden meanings, whatever. We'll hope for the best and see what happens at the end. But it's saying exactly the opposite.
Please leave us your email, because we'd like to sort of obviously keep in touch, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. I'm putting it in the private
Fantastic.
chat now.
Fantastic.
So,
Thank you very much.
but as usual, it's a pleasure talking to you guys from EFDawah. And Hamza probably doesn't remember me, but I was the guy who kept on asking him why did he believe in the story of the cave, what led him to believe, and he then began to give various reasons. Because I wasn't trying to say the cave incident didn't happen. I was like, what convinced Hamza that it really happened?
What was my response at that time?
Oh, you were using some fantastic terms. You were calling, what was it you said Muhammad was? You said one of the terms was Muhammad was not the confessor, the truth. Muhammad was known as the
trusted God. Yeah.
That was the one. And then we all were saying, what does that mean? And then you were telling us.
Yeah, but the simple answer is very simple. Very simple indeed. Allah told us that's what happened.
Oh, well, if Allah told you, how do you know that what Allah said is correct? Allah told you that Muhammad, what he saw in the cave was correct. Well, I mean, that just solves everything. Why did you just tell us that? Now we're all believers. Come on, Hamza. I mean, my question to you is, why do you believe what Allah says? And now you go back to the book. And now in a nice little circle you dance. Hopefully you don't get like circle sick. I don't know what you call it when you spin around in a circle.
Captain Kirk said so.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I
can't get more detailed than that. That's it. Allah said it happened that way.
Yeah, that's fine. I understand belief.
It goes back to whether you believe the Quran is from Allah and whether you believe Muhammad is a messenger of Allah.
Okay, but all of that you're just saying that Allah said that it's true what happened in the cave, and Muhammad is the one that told you about Allah, and you don't notice the circularity of your argument there. Anybody else could say exactly the same thing about any other belief, and you would be in no better position to critique them, because you're starting from a circular argument. That's a logical fallacy, unless you accept circularity. But then I'm going to claim that you're being irrational, because that's a fallacy that's is not going to lead you towards truth.
This, for me, rather than reading the Quran, I think you need to take a step back. I think you need to look at the question. First of all, you believe a creator exists. I'm assuming Allah exists.
Yes, I do not believe in randomness. I don't believe the universe came about random. I do believe something was responsible, but what it is, I don't know yet.
Fair enough. But do you believe that's all right? So do you believe that?
Go on. Oh, it wasn't you.
Something would be the source of all knowledge and all guidance for its creation, if indeed it exists.
Yeah, that's what I choose to believe. I can't prove it, but
okay. But you see, he snuck in the term that it's not just something. He didn't use the word, but it's a conscious entity, right? That's the hidden inference there. You can see how they don't use the word and then say, "Hey, I didn't say it was a god.
I didn't say Allah, no."
But if you're listening closely, they're saying it in a roundabout way. You just got to pay attention.
No, of course not. And so then, obviously, the next step is to be rational and reasonable. Would be to connect to that source.
That would be
right. And then the next question we would ask is, how would we do that? And then, because we believe the source is there, and we want to connect, but how do we connect? And then we look in history and we see many, many men claiming to be messengers of this source. So at this point, we should.
Many men claim to be messengers of all kinds of sources. It wasn't your source.
Come on, please. Oh yes, this is so bad.
I know, but he's got this sort of script part down to a fine art, right? Where he can rattle it off very quickly, and to the uninitiated and those that aren't paying attention. I'm not saying that's Preston necessarily, but the uninitiated or those who aren't paying attention or thinking critically, it sounds very fluid, and it just sounds to the gullible ear quite convincing until you start to break it down, right? And then it doesn't sort of stack up particularly well, or at all.
This is great. I like this. They're using a virtuous circular argument. It's not a vicious circular argument. Come on.
Yeah. They probably even haven't heard that term. Thank goodness, because otherwise they'd probably try to start using it. We have to And once I hear that, I know that there's a virus running around in people's brains when I hear virtuous and vicious, the Christian presupposition virus. And that makes COVID look like it's a walk in the park. That virus is apparently, you cannot get rid of it, no matter what.
You get very, very excited. Would you not agree?
I try not to get too excited.
We should get excited.
But then I think maybe I'm using emotion and not rationale, so I pull back.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's a good point. Why would you be using emotion? You've got to make sure it's rational. I mean, if you could demonstrate it and it was everything that you claimed, then you could be excited about it, I guess, but then you'd want to have a personal conversation, relationship, whatever the case is. I don't want to hear it from other people. I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? And I want to ask all the questions that I've always wanted to ask and, haven't necessarily had the answers that I felt satisfying or whatever the case is. But I don't want to hear it from a 100-year-old book that's vague, ambiguous, repetitive and prone to errors and so forth.
But then what happens at this point, Preston? If so these men claim to be messengers of this cause. But what?
Yeah, but do you know what he said? This cause. Almost none of these messengers claim to be the messengers of Allah. Isn't that interesting? They claim to be messengers of some random God. When it suits them, they then what we call chunk up. In other words, they go up to a higher, more esoteric level and just say this God. Because if they can connect all of these messages around the world to some God, well, that somehow means that it must be their God. And the bridge they build to that doesn't exist. It exists in their mind, but they can't build it in reality, or even, as far as I can tell, reasonably, to use Hamza's term.
What you have to do, like any messenger, is he a messenger for you? Yeah. So if you look at you look at Abraham, was his message for you? Well, apparently not. His message for his people. Moses' message for his people. Jesus' message was for his people. There's only one man in history, Preston. Only one man in the whole of history who claimed to come for you, mate. Only one. And that was Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
Go on, Stops. You want to say something there?
Nah.
Okay. Again, what we want in the book is that's clearly laid out, that it's for all of mankind. Not the book, but Muhammad as a messenger, unless you're going to claim that, whatever he said is he's the messenger and therefore. But how do you know that there was only one? Have you established that? Have you looked into every other religion or claims of humanity making the same sort of claim, and you've ruled them all out? There's thousands of them, so I've got a feeling you haven't. You've looked at a few of them, and when you were asked this question, you said, no, I've only looked at the big ones, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Well, there's plenty of others out there, and some of them make the same sort of claim. So we'd have to go look them up. I'm sure somebody in the chat, if you're listening, please just go look up and give us another one. I haven't got the time to do it now. Tell us any other religion where the prophet or the God says, I've come for all mankind. And in fact, some Christians claim that, right, with Jesus. That's their interpretation, of course, the Jews and the Gentiles. So I've come for all of them. That's what the Christians claim. But then again, of course, the Muslims don't accept Jesus as God, so they're going to rule that out. Okay, that's a different topic.
Christians say that you can, what Jesus says is you could only get to God through me. And so, yeah,
he's the doorway.
You can sort of say, well, this is open door for everybody. Now, but this question with the prophet, actually, this is a question that kills Islam as soon as you go into it. As soon as you present it properly, and there's a sequence to this that you sort of build it up. This kills Islam because of the claims that Islam makes about the prophets and the messengers, and everybody needs their messenger before they can get punished, and there is no messenger. Muhammad was the last one. He's dead 1,000 years, so I insist. It's like a lawyer. I want my lawyer. I want my messenger. This is what the Quran says. It doesn't provide it. So if you learn this a little bit and you go into it, this kills.
Maybe it's something to discuss in one of our shows. Obviously, this Friday we're doing part 2 of the one with Ray, but perhaps the Friday after that we can talk about that. You can run us through the logical progression there, Stops. That would be kind of fascinating to. I mean, I've heard it at a general term.
It totally kills it, yeah.
But I haven't gone into the specifics of that. Cool.
I don't really dispute that, but you need to understand. I'm coming from a Christian background, so part of my brain is still saying, "Hold on, Jesus." So
that's fine. But I'm saying only one man in history has made that claim, and only one man in history has demonstrated that claim. So
the only question to ask is prove it. Show us that's the case. And to show us that's the case, you'd have to show that all the other religions have not made a claim that there's some prophet that's come for all mankind. Maybe you can make that claim, maybe you can substantiate it, but the fact that you're making it doesn't in any way sound interesting to me until you can demonstrate it. It's a massive claim, and so you've got a bit of work ahead of you there, it seems.
In the Quran, Allah says, we sent your Muhammad as a mercy to mankind. This is the first claim. The second claim is of Muhammad.
What did he just say? Didn't he say
Muhammad
he's
is a
not going
mercy
to talk
to
about
mankind?
Allah? Didn't he said he's not going to talk about the Quran, Allah, or Islam? I think he just did.
Yeah, but he's going to claim that Preston sort of pushed him into it. Preston didn't actually do that, but he volunteered to start talking about this. So, yeah. I mean, they can't get away from it, right? As we said, they can use different words. They can say God or whatever. What they really mean is my God, Allah. And again, I want to know why. And I think the only reason, which again, I think it's fallacious thinking on their part, is because when they're arguing with an atheist, for example, they start with the generic God. There needs to be for a God to exist, and then it's my God. So there's this two-step process. But then they keep that reasoning in their brain whenever they talk about anything, instead of going, okay, talk about God, talk about your particular God. Because if your God is true, then you don't even need the first step. If you could demonstrate somehow that the Quran was true, you wouldn't need to convince me that the universe had a beginning and it's more likely that it's, a creator, whatever the case. You could bypass that and go straight to your God if you could just demonstrate that. All the other claims then would just fall into place. I would be forced to accept somehow, even if I didn't understand how, that all the other claims must be the case in some way. And especially if the book showed me that was the case. Now just demonstrate that the book is in fact what you claim. You can bypass all of this other stuff. And that's why, Stops, I said to you, right, at some point I'm going to say to some of the Muslims, hey, let's assume for the sake of argument that a God exists. Now show me that it's your particular God as to some other God, right? And we know what they're going to do, or at least some of the arguments we're going to bring up. And that's the part that I think is quite meaningful to refute or expose or critique or whatever term you want to use, because that Muslims can understand, and they've got a book that talks about it. And then because the bigger claims, they can separate themselves a little bit and go, okay, well, it can be any way, or it's my way, or whatever the case is. Once we get down, and you said it in the other stream, I'd always go back to the Quran. And I think I'm going to try that with some of them. Just suppose that it's possible or probable or whatever the case is for the sake of argument. Now show me that it's your one. Because the bigger claims, we go backwards and forwards on the cosmology and all the rest of it. And we know we're not going to get anywhere on it. So now let's go to their particular God and show that. Like the Christians want to claim that Jesus resurrected, said he was the Son of God, therefore God exists, therefore the Yahweh God exists. I think there's a misstep there, but that's for them. What are the Muslims going to do? They're going to appeal to the falsifiability test, right, which we talked about on Gin and Tonic, which isn't actually a falsifiability test. Yeah, anyway.
Let them call the people from Persia, from Egypt, from Byzantium to worship the one God. This is a demonstration that he was calling non-Arabs and non-Muslims to Islam. Yeah? So this is a kind of manifestation of that mission. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
I understand.
So all you need to do from this position now is to determine whether or not Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, is telling the truth.
And this was where I reached exactly with Abbas and Imran. Everything else we agreed on, but it was the simple fact that I had problems believing that Muhammad had this metaphysical connection with a creator.
Fine. So what do you believe the options are then for Muhammad at this point?
Okay, before he starts here, let me reiterate, we've gone over this before. He's going to leave out A, the most reasonable, B, the easiest for us to put forward, and C, the most difficult for him to refute. He's going to intentionally now, I believe, miss this out. So let's hear what possible options Hamza claims there is for this.
Point.
I think he was a real guy and he did do amazing things, but that... No,
let's just go back to the cave. Muhammad has come down from the cave and he's claiming that an angel has spoken with him and told him he's a messenger of God to the people. Yeah? What are the variables we can have at this point?
Okay, those of you who haven't heard it, he's going to give you various options. He's either this, or this. What he isn't going to give you is that Muhammad was mistaken. The simplest claim for us to make, the easiest for us to put forward reasons, and the hardest for him to refute. Let's listen.
I mean, for me, I find four. Either he's crazy delusional, he's been meditating too long, and he's having hallucinations and thinking angels are talking to him, or he's been deceived. This is a Christian claim. He's been deceived by a demon that's pretended to be an angel, and told Muhammad he's a messenger of God, but in fact he's delivering a message from the devil, from Satan, yeah? Or he's lying. He created this whole religion for some whatever reason, yeah?
Whoa.
Or he's telling the truth, yeah? So all you have to...
What did I tell you? The option, my option, not involved. And even when Ray said it, if you go and watch the Gin and Tonic show, right, he ignored it. Somehow, so if I ever get to have that conversation, I'm going to press him on that. Because he's never acknowledged it, and therefore he doesn't have to defend it. So he can go with a weaker claim that he thinks he can steamroll over or defend much easier, that he's a liar, etc. And the moment you do that, as we saw with Ray on the Gin and Tonic show, it's the shifting of the burden of proof. You need to demonstrate something. So when he asks you this question, he's now putting you in the position of having to put forward an option and defend it. It's exactly what the Christians do with Jesus. Well, tell me what other option could be reasonable other than him resurrecting, shifting of the burden of proof. But actually, on that case, for example, just as a side note, I like what Dilanti said. He was beamed aboard an alien spacecraft. Now Christians demonstrate to me that that's more or less reasonable than he was resurrected. But I think going down the route that, because Hamza's got to, trying to keep you in a box here, so that because he's got answers to all of these ones, what he doesn't have a sufficient answers to, that Muhammad was mistaken.
The thing that I look at, I don't believe he's a liar. I don't believe he was possessed by a demon, but I entertain the possibility that he could have been mistaken in his experience. I don't believe that. I'm still looking, but I'm just looking at the options. But like I said,
you are aware this experience was over 23 years, yeah?
No, we're talking about the cave experience. Are you talking about all the other ones that he claims to have had? We're talking about the cave experience, yeah? And you're not addressing Preston's point, well, he could have been mistaken.
You see, that's where I'm still doing the research. I didn't know it was 23 years. I just thought it was shorter than that. I thought it was a one moment experience. He then
No. This was the moment in the cave was the introduction. And then for 23 years he received revelation, which is the Quran.
No, he claims to have received it. That's the proper way of saying it. I know you believe it, but for anybody else, he claims to have. And it all started hearing a voice in a cave. What would anybody else think if somebody came out and said, hey, I heard a voice in a cave? And his wife Khadija convinced him, apparently, either that he was correct according to the Encyclopedia Britannica I happened to see, and I was like, I need to ask Stops about that. But then suggested that he go and speak to, I think you said it was a Christian, didn't you, Stops? Because I thought it was Jewish. Go speak to this Jewish...
Christian.
Yeah, I thought it was Jewish, and you said, no, it's a Christian, who then convinced him, no, it was in fact Gabriel. This is where your whole thing started, by a man hearing a voice in a cave whom he couldn't even identify. Nobody else was with him. Other people had to convince him of who this supposedly was. And then you want to go from there and say, well, this kept on happening. Nobody else had that experience either. So all he did was keep coming up with stumps that you claim is revelation. And this should be convincing. No, he was entirely mistaken from the moment he heard voices in a cave till the moment he died. Demonstrate that that's not the most plausible option.
And we have to bear another thing in mind, he was illiterate. And so, because the Quran says, and the reason we know this, because the Quran says he was illiterate, he was unlettered.
Oh, well, if the Quran, which he supposedly dictated, says he was illiterate, well, then that must be the case, right? And because everybody around him thought that he was illiterate, he could have hidden that, especially after the cave, especially after he was convinced that he's a messenger. What better way than to say, hey, I'm a dummy. This is just Gabriel coming through me, right? This is just Gabriel speaking to me. I don't know anything. I can't even write. How do we know that? But even if we granted that, so what? Somebody can still speak words and they can be illiterate. Somebody else can write it down. He didn't author anything. He just spoke, remember?
And if he was being able to read or write, the people around him would have said, whoa, wait a minute, we know you can read and write. So this is like a demonstration that he was illiterate. So the question that you need to ask yourself, how does an illiterate man in the 6th century come up with the Quran?
He heard a voice in a cave. He was convinced by other people that it was true. He then started to believe it himself, and then whenever it was convenient to him, he would claim that he'd had another revelation. There's my explanation.
And the people followed him. And Islam is what it is today, based upon which it can't be a mistake. It's either he's crazy, delusional, having hallucinations, but then you have to stretch that over 23 years, or the demon claim, this is from the Christians, yeah? And the problem that collapses because according to the New Testament, Jesus says Satan can't do this thing. Satan can't oppose himself. A house that is divided cannot stand. And if you read the Quran, you'll know that Satan is accursed. We're told to seek refuge from Satan. And the question that would also need to be asked, why would Satan send a man to pagan Arabs worshipping statues, abusing their daughters, abusing women, abusing animals, and tell them to stop all that and to worship the God of Abraham?
Because it could have been a test. Satan pretending to be God and testing them. There you go. You guys always claim a test. I can use the test against you. Works just as well.
Why would the devil do that?
I just wanted to ask, the 23 years, if I wanted to read up on it, is it in Hadith or is it in the Quran?
Obviously, it will be in the history, isn't it?
The history, that's so it'll be in Bukhari or...
It'll be from the moment he received revelation to the moment he died, and the testimony of his companions and the testimony of his wife as to the revelation. And the experience is what we went through when the revelations came down.
Okay, what I'll do then is I'll check in the Bukhari to read it to get a thorough understanding. Oh, what's that book?
So this is what you want to read.
Exactly.
This is written by Martin Lings. It's the biography based, his life based on the earlier sources. And so this goes through everything from, it starts with Abraham. And it goes on to explaining how the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ended up in Arabia. And then it kind of goes through basically each stage of his life, beginning from like his birth.
I think we need to do a show stops. You've given me all that information, right, on the historicity of Muhammad, and maybe we go through that. We've probably done it before, but maybe it's worth doing again to show that.
Yeah, I've done an entire 1.5 hour show on this, only looking at the historicity claims. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh, it must have been about 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, so it might be worth redoing that again at some point. I mean, you've got all the documentation you've sent me as well. Because I'm saying if everything that you've collected is in fact the case, we can certainly doubt that this guy Muhammad existed. If everything that you've got there is in fact an accurate representation of everything that is historically known about this character, then it's far from anywhere remotely certain that he in fact existed as is portrayed in the Quran, the Sirah, Hadith, Sunnah, etc. Right? So
he's not in the Quran at all. The problem there's different levels.
Yeah, I mean I don't want to go into it too deeply now, but yeah.
No. There's just a quick summary. There's not a shred of evidence that Muhammad existed historically. Okay, what we do know for a fact, 100%, that it can't have been in Mecca. So that point is totally wrong. And this is where it starts. This is what caught me out, because I sort of assumed that Muhammad existed. And then I started questioning, and so I found that, whoa, there's something very wrong. And what kicked it off was the fact that Mecca was described as like totally different than what is claimed in the Sunnah. If you look at geology, if you look at agriculture, if you look at and that's it. So this is where you need to start your investigation.
Yeah, I'll remind you, and then hopefully we can do maybe 1 or 2 shows, part 1 and part 2. And again, we can invite Preston or other people to come and see. And again, of course, they can go and reference the sources themselves. I think that's one thing that you and I want to do, is we'll either bring up a book or tell people to go research it. And what we notice here is a lot of bold claims are made, but there's no evidence to support it, right?
Going through to his first revelation and then continuing on through all the way to his death. And it's a brilliant book. It's very well put together. And it was also written by a revert called Martin Lings.
Thanks very much. I've just found it on the internet.
Why would that be relevant if it's written by a revert or anybody else? I mean, what difference does that make? It's like when Sabur, for example, says, oh, well, an atheist says that, as if that's somehow more credible. Then you look at somebody like Michael Ruse, and you find out that he's supposedly an atheist, but very much kind of in bed with religion. And you see he has a big bias against, quote-unquote, new atheists. So he's not a particularly unbiased source.
No, they are not arguing if Prophet Muhammad existed. What is happening is somebody made a claim regarding the historicity of Muhammad. Somebody said they are historical facts. And what I am saying is no, there are no historical facts. What I am saying, there is no evidence that Muhammad existed. There is no argument here. I'm just saying if you want to prove, or you want to display, you want to demonstrate, or whatever you want to show that Muhammad existed, you need to go and do that. But there is nothing out there that you can bring that actually demonstrates that Muhammad existed. This is the whole thing. There's no argument here.
Very strong historical evidence that this particular man was accurately represented as he's done with multiple eyewitness testimony from people that were not part of his group. And again, Stops has got a lot of information on that shows that that's not the case.
And there's other things. There's inscriptions. There's numismatics. There's a whole lot of different, let's say, indications that people in history existed. Something like Alexander the Great and things like that. So you have different areas, and it's not just people. It's not just, you have a lot of documents and things that you can actually physically look up.
But again, corroborating eyewitness testimony from other people, writings about them, etc., etc. Now, you probably haven't done it, Steve, but if you have to start look, or if you come onto the show, if you listen when Stops does it, you'll actually find that what the supposed historical evidence for Muhammad is extremely sparse, and it doesn't even mention him properly by name either, the original documents. And so, and I've listened to Stops debate somebody about this, and he sent me the documentation. And if you think it is in fact as clear cut, then come on and show it, or in fact bring the strongest person you can. Because if it's the case and Stops is wrong, then I'm going to say, Stops, it's more convincing that he existed. Here's the historical evidence that shows that it's more likely the case that he existed than that didn't. And if that's not the case, then I think you or anybody else should go, hang on, it's a question mark of whether he in fact existed as he's portrayed, or was it somebody else that had a vague name similar, and then they had to assume that he was the same guy, and so on and so forth. So I'm easy either way. It doesn't bother me whether Muhammad existed or not, but what we want is good historical evidence, supposedly for one of the most important people of all time.
And the thing is, maybe this is funny for you, but for me this is actually quite important to establish these things. And you can't know that Alexander existed. All we have is compelling evidence that indicates that a person called Alexander existed and did what is claimed that he did. That's all that we have.
Yeah, so we could prove that Darwin existed, depending on what you mean by proof. We could probably find his grave, we could find the historical accounts, we could hear of all the people, we could obviously talk about what he, the theory, natural selection that he came about, the book that he wrote, etc. It depends what you mean by proof. So, but we won't go down that rabbit hole now at this moment. Let's see how much further we can get here.
Even has an audio file, so you can just listen to it instead of reading.
Yeah, I've got the audio.
I just want to leave you with one thing, Preston, just in case you realise that craziness is out the window and deception by the demon is out the window. Then all you're going to be left then is a lie or the truth, and that's when you have to look into whether or not Muhammad, peace be upon him, lied, and then we'd look at the motive for the lie, and would see what could he have to gain by creating this religion. And then we look at he was married to the richest woman in Mecca. We look at he had status in the city. We look at he was offered so much things to stop calling the people to worship this one God. He was then persecuted, and the people following persecuted and exiled in the desert. Now, if this is for a lie, we have to question what kind of motive is this. And then we look at when he was successful, when he did achieve triumph over Mecca, when they returned from Medina. He didn't live like a king. He didn't have palaces. He didn't have gold. He was a simple man. So we have to question what's the motive, right? And then we can take it to another level. Let's just say he found some, I don't know, altruistic motive. He just wanted to stop all this debauchery going on around him. He wanted the people to stop abusing women and animals and people like that, and to treat their elders care. All the teachings of Islam, alhamdulillah. And so he had the motive. But then we have to ask ourselves, then, did he have the capacity? Because what you're saying, if Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the author of the Quran, which would be the claim that he's a liar, he would need to memorize the Old and New Testament, the oral traditions of the Jews, and the apocryphal books of the Christians. He would then have to rehash them in his brain, and then over piecemeal, over 23 years, regurgitate it. Remembering he's
okay, we talked about this before. Now, of course, he didn't. He wouldn't have to do that. And when you look at the Quran, it's a poor representation of the Old and New Testament anyway. It's vague, ambiguous. He doesn't even have the particular people. We've talked about this many times on the Gin and Tonic. Stops has talked about it. Thunderous has talked about it. The Quran doesn't accurately represent. It's got bits and pieces. It's almost like hearsay. What he's heard from other people, that's come into the book. Nowhere near as detailed potentially as the Bible, and even the Bible isn't that detailed, but detailed enough. The Quran is nowhere near as detailed as that, at least from what we've read so far on those claims. So yeah, I don't think that stacks up. But you can see how confident he says this, right? And anybody who's Muslim will go, wow, that's amazing. At no point would they go, okay, well, how does he know that, right? Where's the evidence for all of this stuff? What does it mean that he had to rehash this? You mean that he accurately... Let me open a Bible, let me open the Quran, and let me compare the two and see how accurately the Quran replays the stories of the Bible. The parts that it says are not corrupted. and let's see how accurate it is. Because if it was accurate, it would be, it'd be telling you the fine details. And when we've read those particular parts, it does exactly the opposite. It gives you vague references as if he heard some parts of it and didn't remember it or didn't hear the whole story or whatever the case is. So,
illiterate. This is the claim, and the thing you have to add into that mix: the Arabian Old Testament. So the Old Testament in Arabic did not arrive 400 years after he died. So you could squeeze a motive somehow, but even when it comes to the capacity and the fulfillment of that lie, it's impossible. So my brother Preston.
Yeah, when he says impossible, it just means it's unlikely according to him because he thinks he's got the answers to this, but he still hasn't answered the question that he's mistaken. Presumably for him, that's like not even. He doesn't even entertain it because it sounded like he was trying to skate by that or dismiss that as in like couldn't have been mistaken because he heard this and then he did the same thing for 23 years. That just crushes mistaken as if that's somehow a response to it. And I gave a response to that anyway. So we haven't heard him deal with that, and we probably never will unless I try and press him on it.
Surrender your will to the one who created you, inshallah.
Inshallah.
I just want to ask one other thing before they finish here. There's this guy saying, yeah, that's testimonial evidence, Rob. Presumably Steve is talking about evidence for what, other historical figures? Well, yeah, of course. There's testimonial, there's written, which would be a version of testimonial evidence. But again, we want strong evidence for historic characters that existed. I don't know about Stops, and I haven't read it, so Stops is much more. But Christians themselves, and that's obviously a biased source, claim that the historical evidence for a person called Jesus is overwhelming. Again, Stops might challenge that. And if that is the case, well, then there's somebody called Jesus that exists. But whether he did the supernatural claims, of course, is just a completely different idea. But was there somebody called Yeshua or somebody similar? They want to claim that the evidence is overwhelming. If that's the case, I'm prepared to accept it. If it isn't, then I'm not. Same with any other historical figure. And you should do the same with Muhammad. But will you? I don't know.
Thanks very much for your time, guys. It's been a pleasure. And
good luck, Preston.
I know you're going into a corner then, so I'm back away.
Well, no, I don't mind talking even face to face when I speak with Abbas and Imran and yourself, even at Speaker's Corner. I don't have a problem. I'm just searching, and I don't rule out anything. And I'm glad you gave me that audio file. That book, Muhammad, by Martin Lings, that's definitely going to be, I hope, easier than the Quran itself.
So it's a bit less authentic, but if you just like to chillax for like an hour and a bit, watch the film The Message. It gives you a basic narrative of the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, and the early journey of Islam and how it kicked off.
Wait.
It's a cool movie.
The movie with Anthony Quinn playing the role.
That's the one.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of clips of it. Yeah.
I haven't seen it. What are they talking about, Stops? Do you know? Some movie?
No idea.
Okay.
Superior one though.
Yeah,
this is the beauty. So I really recommend that. But I wish you the best of luck on your journey. I wish you success, and may Allah guide you on the straight path.
Take care, guys.
Take care, Preston. Wish you all the best.
Peace.
I think the argument he presented from consciousness.
You see how he's always welcome because he didn't really challenge them at all. He was just asking a couple of questions. They're happy to ask the questions. As soon as there's robust pushback, that's when the defenses come up and then some of the excuses come up. Stops comes on. His pushback is much harder than Preston's, for example, and he doesn't have the patience for them to go into long monologues, and somehow they don't like this. They just want to have an unfettered time where they can monologue and tell you what they think, and go through long stories in some cases, or just assert them in others, and then just expect people to just accept this. Well, obviously we're not going to do that.
This is, I think, for me, is the strongest one. I've never heard any good argument against it.
Sorry, what did he say was the strongest one? That's 228.58. 228. Let me just go back just a tiny bit there.
I've seen a lot of clips of it.
It's not the superior one though.
Yeah,
this is the beauty. So I really recommend that. But I wish you the best of luck on your journey. I wish you success, and may Allah guide you on the straight path.
Take care, guys.
Take care, Preston. Wish you all the best.
Peace.
I think the argument he presented from consciousness is, I think, for me, is the strongest one. I've never heard any good argument against it.
No,
that's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah.
Right.
Subhanallah, yeah, absolutely.
You've never heard anything? Well, Jordan, I don't think you've read anything about the problem of consciousness. And there's, like we say, very divergent views on that. It's a very difficult topic and a very deep topic. So no wonder you haven't read anything about it. But your answer is a simple one. Well, God gave you consciousness. Well, demonstrate that your God exists, and in fact he did that.
I mean, there's a book by Thomas Nagel, Professor Thomas Nagel, which is Mind in the Cosmos. It's the one that we know when we did the Google Garage discussion about pantheism. That's the one that I was reading at the time. And he raises two things, because the title of the book talks about why our notion of Darwinian evolution is probably most definitely false. And he raises two things. So one thing he says is that the amount of diversity we see in nature is not explainable by the time that is alleged to have passed. So he talks about why that is, and he's not a theist, he's an atheist person. The second thing he says is that the theory itself, the Darwinian theory of evolution, doesn't account for something that's abundant everywhere, which is consciousness. So if your theory is not
when you say abundant everywhere, as far as we can tell, consciousness is only in certain creatures on this planet, and depends what you mean by consciousness. Again, is an amoeba conscious? A single cell organism, is that conscious? Or are you going to say there's different levels? At the moment, we've only demonstrated consciousness is on one planet out of 1 to the power of like 100 in the entire universe. So when you say it's ubiquitous or it's everywhere, you mean it's spread out over a small part of this planet, relatively speaking, geographically, on some level of the species here. So no, I wouldn't say that that's abundant. Maybe you've got a different level of abundant.
accounting for a major observation, then there's something in your theory that has to be deficient, or maybe your theory needs completely overhauling. And that's a very powerful point that he makes. And I think that, so this is why the argument from consciousness is really a powerful argument, because as the brother Yusuf was saying, it's not reducible to anything material. You can't do it at all. And there's lots of people who are trying. I mean, there's an anaesthetist who's trying to inject people with, when you give people anesthetic, they don't remember that time that they've had. And he's trying to see what effects this is having on a level to see, are we taking away consciousness or not? And it's very difficult to establish that, because all you're seeing is, if you put someone into a sleep state, they can't remember what they did. But actually, are they actually losing consciousness? Are they not still dreaming or doing something else? Because we can dream and not remember it. So there's no way you're going to get to the bottom of this conundrum. It's not going to be something that you find.
I swear I had a dream when I had surgery. I don't
You
know.
probably did then.
Yeah, I was just like, I've never heard that before.
Quick shout out to Answer. Hey, my man, all good.
Like you just get cut off then. I didn't know that. Maybe I had a dream after that. And
Sorry?
I can remember what I was dreaming. I even remember when I was put down. That was such a wonderful feeling. I said to the doctor afterwards, anesthetics, I said, listen, can you give me some of that stuff? That was brilliant. And he just laughed.
Yeah, I think they're making sort of very simplistic arguments here. It's a lot more complicated than either they understand or making out here.
just asleep still.
But I did this thing once. The guy I was having the surgery on my knee, and what they did was he said count backwards from 10. So I went 10, 9, 8, and then as far as I was aware, I was still counting. But actually, I'd woken up. So my 6, 7, 8, and my 5, 6, 7 were after the procedure. It was so funny. He was laughing.
Wow, that's crazy.
Abdul is talking a lot there, but when he comes on here, he's like our best friend. He's almost like a Muslim atheist. So I'm not sure whether he suddenly got brave in the comments, but he was on here obviously, and basically agreeing with everything we said, and stops now by asking, well, how's he
come
Muslim?
tomorrow and refute us, kill us totally, absolutely wonderful.
Come with your A game there. Don't agree with us. Well, you might be forced to agree with us if you're intellectually honest, which I don't mind. But come with your strongest arguments.
All right, should we let Red Pen on? He's not Muslim though, isn't he? He's not an atheist.
He did, yeah. You're right, man. How's it going, Red Pen?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you, brother, for letting me here, and I would say Jazakumullah khairan. Wish God to reward you. So I just have a quick comment about topic today, and especially I'm linking to what's also the topic yesterday, because the gentleman atheist mentioned the Newtonian physics. So in order, when he's talking about the Newtonian physics, he didn't address the fact that when we use the Newtonian physics, for instance, one of the physical Newtonian physics is the Darcy's law that describing the fluid flow in poor spaces. He didn't mention that we use some conditions, and we put a lot of restriction in order to address and simple the problem. Otherwise, we have to switch to a numerical analysis, and do some averaging to the other part.
I don't know. He's just gone off track about, I think, Tom Jump.
I don't know. Can you fast forward this somehow?
Yeah, I
saw you going forward, because this doesn't make any sense at all.
All right, let's go on here and see if this goes further.
Later, bro. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, Malik. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you guys?
For everyone on the panel, Malik said that he's an ex-atheist.
MashaAllah.
I love hearing about ex-atheists. I want to ask them what it was that convinced them, right? And we go through that with a fine-tooth comb. I don't often get the chance to do this, right? they seem to not want to stick around when we want to go through that. I think maybe they don't want to admit it, but I think there's maybe a concern or a fear around maybe you'll highlight where their critical thinking wasn't operational, and that's exactly what I want to do, is show where their critical thinking wasn't operational. I don't expect them to necessarily accept it, but I want to point it out for everybody else. And so yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I'll be open about it with Yusuf or with everybody. I want to go through and point out where I think your critical thinking has not been operational as much as you think it is.
And you guys all actually, except for Brother Jordan, he accepted Islam a little bit later after me. But yes, you guys all definitely, mashallah, had, may Allah reward you. Definitely had an influence on it. By the way, Brother Hamza, your video of the convinced Christian, challenging the convinced Christian, I actually watched that video just to get material on how to attack a Christian. I had no idea it would lead me down this path. We planned a lot of plans,
You were an atheist at that time?
Yes.
Watching that
maybe they're going to ask him.
I actually was quite militant because I felt.
See, I want to hear from him now. Why did he change? Right, then we can listen to the process and see if we spot what happened for him.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
That I felt offended that somebody would lie to me, and I saw it as a grand lie. Actually, that's how it greatly relates to yesterday's stream, because that blew my mind, and I felt that I had to come on and talk about it.
Are you a born Muslim, brother? Are you?
You've got a love answer. Ex-atheists, people who try to be brave and face reality without believing in magical weird crap and then pussy it out. Nothing like answer to sort of just cut through it with
I thought I was the only one to do things like that.
No, I think you and Answer, it's a toss-up for the gold medal of who's the bluntest.
You're born Muslim?
Yes, but I proclaimed it and had no idea why.
Revert, Jordan, mashallah.
Revert, we want to get people like this on the next stream.
Yeah, big up the revert.
I
think
I want to get the reverts on with us, and we'll go through the reverts thinking processes and their stories and so forth. I want the reverts on with us. Why won't they do that?
We should do a stream on that, invite people on like Malik.
I'd be happy to come. But regarding today's show and yesterday's show, by the way, if somebody wants a masterclass on how to effectively red herring something, they should watch Rob, what he did today. It was amazing. And I felt...
Okay, I did some red herring, so let's listen closely and substantially now. He's going to point out what I did as a red herring, and if that's the case, I'm going to have to acknowledge that. So let's listen in.
All we really had to do, because this was supposed to be a review of last stream, starting with TJ and his answers. If we just brought it back to, let's play Richard Dawkins' video and ask Rob, hey, where did Rob make the distinction between a deist model of God and a theist model of God?
That was the point I was trying to make. I agree 100%.
So,
oh dear, this guy's got a misunderstanding. So his view that I strawmanned is that why did I want to go to a theist version of a God?
But you explained this.
Yeah, I know, and I explained why, and even Hamza had to agree that he hadn't thought about or wasn't prepared to initially offer why atheists come to him and say, hey, evolution disproves God. And obviously what they mean is your particular God.
Yeah.
So, and what Dawkins
so
said
smug. This is what I hate so much. They sound so condescending and so smug, when actually they are the ones who don't understand it.
Yeah, well, if I've made a red herring or something, that occasionally happens. I'm also human, but I'm listening, and if this is what he claims is the red herring, then I think he misunderstood my whole critique.
That would be crucial. I think that would be a very good ending for this when you put it on, YouTube world. Play Dawkins' video, overlay Rob's voice, and just write down that question of show me where Dawkins, in the Ahmed Didat style, show me where Dawkins made that distinction.
Yes. But I'm not interested in whether Dawkins made the distinction. You're completely misunderstanding the point. I am challenging Hamza's claim. I'm not challenging Dawkins's claim. I'm not claiming that he made a distinction and said Allah. I'm saying to Hamza, why are you using the word God when atheists are specifically talking about, most often, a particular theist god. So, in fact, the red herring is bringing up Dawkins. I've got nothing to say about that. We can talk about that, and we have, but that's got nothing to do with the position that Hamza brought that I was challenging. So, talk about a red herring. I think you need to be looking in the mirror, my man.
So just going off of yesterday, because I loved that stream, because I was convinced by the same fallacious argument that TJ made. So let me just go down the list real quick because I took notes. Number one.
All right, well, here we go. This guy's got something to say. Let's hear what he's got to say.
If TJ is watching, brother TJ, lies of omission exist. Okay, there's two kinds of lies. Lies of commission, when you are willfully giving false information, and lies of omission, when you are omitting information that you know. That is what Richard Dawkins admitted and confessed in front of everybody.
No, he didn't. You're profoundly mistaken. We've been through this. We're not going to bring it up now. It's late in the day. Please go watch part 1 of this. It might even have been of our previous review. I think it was of actually part 1 or 2 of our previous review of the original Hamza's Den stream. You can go back and look at my couple of previous videos. We've covered it in depth. I went word for word through them. I brought it up on screen. I went word for word through there. And I'm ready if somebody wants to bring that. I actually gave something to Stops the other day. And I'm going to challenge Muslims on that, actually. So, Abdel, if you're coming on Gin and Tonic, I'm going to challenge you with a particular phrase and see whether you think it in any way is deceptive. And then we'll see.
That's how I went into it. That's why I was so anti-theist. That's why I felt like I...
Okay, so let me just make sure. Let's just see if he says it. Is he claiming that he was converted to an atheist because he was told evolution is true, he was convinced of evolution, and that if you believe in evolution, that you have to be an atheist? And had he been told that in fact evolution is compatible, or at least some theists claim that evolution is compatible with their interpretation of theism, he would still be a theist? Well, let's see.
So that's connecting my story to exactly that. My second point. One thing that I was, even as an atheist, I was very, very uncomfortable with looking into this, the rebranding and double meaning of words. Okay? What is a fact? What is a theory? When we speak in the academic sense, what is a fact?
It's fascinating that he brings this up, because in my experience, it's most often the Muslims that conflate the two, or don't understand one from the other. But let's just...
showing. This is exactly what he's demonstrating right now.
Fact is very different from the common knowledge of the people. And in intellectual discussions, atheists specifically never, ever, ever make that distinction. And that's another lie.
Which atheists are you talking about? I make that distinction regularly.
I don't know. This is a total fool. Yeah.
I make that distinction regularly between something that where somebody claims is a fact, is a layman's term, which is really just I believe it with a high probability, and a scientific fact or a mathematical proof. It depends who you're speaking to and what the position is. But I'll often make the distinction, so I'm not sure. Maybe you're speaking to other atheists.
Don't these people understand that they're making a total fool of themselves, that they're embarrassing themselves? Why doesn't somebody up there tell them, listen, stop, you're looking foolish, stop this line of reasoning, it's ridiculous. Stop, brother. They don't.
Of omission. So, fact in common language is an undisputable truth that cannot be up for review. For example, I have the charger for when I drop it, it falls. It falls. It did it again. That's a fact.
No, that's a probability.
No, that's not. It depends on your position. It depends on your location. It depends on so many different factors.
Yeah, anyway.
Why it falls is the theory. So for TJ to say that evolution is a proven theory is fallacious. He's using double meanings.
He didn't say that.
So there's my point on that.
He doesn't understand the difference between evolution as a process which is happening in nature, which is a fact, and the theory of evolution, which is the explanation of it. Those are two different things.
Yeah, when somebody says it's a fact, generally what they mean, they're not using the philosophical sense. They're saying, hey, with a high probability, we believe this to be true, or we know this to be the case, or whatever the case is. But if you had to ask somebody with a philosophical thing, very few people are going to make absolute quote unquote factual claims. So it depends but it's the same thing. You guys believe that the Quran was authored by God, and that's your fact. But what you really mean is that you believe that with some level of probability greater than 50%. It's fine. All you need to establish is that you're both talking about the word in the same way. If you're both talking about it in the same way, then either the word is incorrectly used, or you're going to accept the word and you're going to move forward. So when T-Jump says it's a fact, what do you... Yeah.
It's true. But we're using like a highly flawed way of communicating, which is language, which is words, where I am using a word as a container to convey information, and your brain has to disassemble it and make some sense out of it. But because we are not speaking the same language, we're not the same level of education, there are huge differences. It is very difficult to get the meaning of a word that I mean to put into this container of a word to arrive at the destination and then be disassembled to mean the same thing. That's very difficult. And yet we are using this language all the time to convey information. So we need to be very careful what we're doing here.
Okay, I held Darwinism.
I just want to see, I'm always interested in statements like this. Atheists are lying to themselves. That would imply, Steve, I mean, by all means try and back up your claim. That would mean that we are knowingly making false statements. I mean, go ahead and try and back that up.
The way people hold scripture, and when I actually look into the philosophy of science, the paradigms under which we inspect the evidence, I had to let it go just on logical basis before accepting a creator. Here's
what exactly did you have to let go? What exactly did you have to let go? You're just not clear.
Darwinism is pseudoscience because it can never be tested and it can never be proven
this guy, please.
false. Here's why. Two reasons. Reason number one, how it's framed.
Yeah, I'm sure that all the evolutionary experts would be fascinated to hear that it can't be disproved or proved. All right, let's see if we can move past this little bit here.
Because this is painful to watch, really.
Let's just go on a little bit further here.
Not to rape.
I think somebody else
that I could get caught. But that's it. Logically, under that model of there is no God and Darwinian evolution, it's logical for me to rape to the degree that it helps me pass on.
Oh my word. Where is he getting this from? Even Richard Dawkins, who you guys dislike and quote when it suits you, even he says that we shouldn't be using Darwinian evolution as our model for morality. Even he says that. So for you to come along and say we should be doing that, where are you getting this from? You're just making this shit up. But by all means, come on the Gin and Tonic show or come onto our stream and try and make these claims.
On my genes, and to the degree that I desire, overlaid with to the degree that I could get away.
Can you go to the next guy?
Okay, let's see.
If it is a guy.
There's somebody here. Okay, here's a new person.
That deal with this, that have a conscience or that feel compassion, despite doing something to someone that they would even consider evil. But you've got to allow for the fact that there are psychopaths, and if they don't experience that, then you're not really offering them very much to not do something if it is guaranteed that they can get away with it.
What are you offering them? Eternal punishment, the threat of hell if they do, and an all-seeing celestial dictator. Is that going to convince maybe it will, but again, all you're saying is, hey, here's a celestial dictator that will punish you in the afterlife. You can't get away with it. Somehow that will convince a psychopath not to do it? Well, maybe it would, but A, is that moral? And B, that's just a story that you're telling yourselves so that you can feel like people don't, quote unquote, get away with murder.
And the thing, Krishna is just making a good point. There's a lot of Muslims who run around saying, I'm an ex-atheist, just to get some attention.
Yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it?
Have we lost Malik?
No, I think it's still there. But give an example. If you watch a Mad Max movie.
I'm with you. And here's the thing: from my previous paradigm and belief system, here's how I would answer you. Your feeling of guilt is irrational. It is not logical.
Oh shit! He carries on.
But then
and
the
on
whole
and
point is
on.
that from a nihilistic
that would be
perspective,
great. Yeah,
who cares
then go
about
past him.
rationality? Why would you need to be rational? So, but this is the point. It goes both ways. So you can move in towards like a psychopathic sort of response to all of this, and someone says, no, but it's illogical, and let's just assume that it is for the sake of argument. Even if it is logical, from a nihilistic perspective, it's like, who cares?
All right, let's get towards the
Why
end
should I
here.
be
There we go. I think that's pretty much the end here.
2-minute response.
Oh,
You can do it. You can do it.
May I ask for the second time, will the youth discussion, the stream as was advertised? I doubt it, because they don't know what it is. They don't understand it, and there is no way.
Well, I
Because
think
if
actually-
they discuss it, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
I think Yusuf does understand, and he does actually mention it. I don't know if this will be the moment he does it. Let's just see.
What was
advertised?
The
You can do it.
So the Euthyphro is something
there you
put
go.
forward by
Excellent.
Plato. He has a discussion between Socrates and a guy called Euthyphro. I can never pronounce that properly. And they're basically getting into a conversation about what the nature of good is, or what makes something good. And Socrates asks the question: is it good because God wills it? Or he says the gods, because we're polytheistic, but it applies the same whether it's gods or God. Is it good because God wills it, or does God will it because it's good? And this is put forward as a dilemma, because what they say is that it's a dichotomy. You can only have one of the answers, but they also say that there are problems that follow from the answers that you give, whether or not you choose that one or the other. Now, I have an issue with this, because they would say that if you say that God, it's good because God said it, they then, if you say yes, that's the case, they then try to say, well, then morality is arbitrary, and they say that it's random or based on a whim. Now, I have an issue with that as an inference from saying yes to the first one. One, because it doesn't follow that it's arbitrary. Because God says something, it's not based on random choice, and it's not something like a personal whim.
Okay. So what he's actually saying here, let's translate what he's actually saying. He's saying that it is necessarily the case that God must do X, must do Y, and that must be good. And what you're then saying is God does not have a choice, in which case he's not all powerful. So if you're going to go the route and say, well, no, it's not arbitrary, it's necessary, that God is a necessarily omnibenevolent being, then all you're saying is, God's not all powerful, but you're also saying, well, again, you're begging the question, how do we know he's omnibenevolent? What is the standard by which to judge that? How do we know that he's not malevolent? He's the ultimate malevolent, pretending to be omnibenevolent to trick all of us. How do you establish that?
Personal whim, when we're talking about that, you think of a human being sitting around thinking, I don't know, that one, I'll go for that one. It's a very anthropomorphic view of God.
No, we're not doing that. You just did that. We're not saying it's anthropomorphic. You just liken it to a human being. We're not saying it's a human being at all. We're purely going on the logic. How do you establish that God is all good? And it is arbitrary. If you're going to say it's not arbitrary, then, like I say, you're introducing other problems that are probably even worse.
It was
And
conceptual.
with regards to the second one, as well, because they kind of link, and I think you can say yes to both of them. So I see it as a false dichotomy. I don't think that you can make it out to be the case that you have to pick one or the other, and I don't agree with the inferences. So I would say, well, they would say, sorry, if you pick the second one, that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala picks or wills something because it is good, they then try to infer that this implies that there is an objective morality that exists independent from God, and that God is subject to it.
Correct. Well, that's it. That is, in fact, the objection. Yeah.
I would say that is false, because even if you say that God wills something because it is good, we would say that God, that would be contained within God's knowledge.
No, you can't say that. That's exactly what you can't say on that particular view. You'd have to take the other horn of the dilemma. Yeah, you can't take that. You'd have to say that it's good because God is good, which is a tautology as well. So if he's appealing to something outside of himself, then you can't take the position you're taking now. I think you've got the two of them confused. You must be taking the other horn.
It's not independent of God. God's knowledge is a pre-eternal attribute of the divine essence. And so any reasons that are made in terms of a justification for something being good are contained within the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not separate from him, and they're not this, ontologically separate entity that are...
Okay, so what you are saying is you're taking the first horn of the dilemma, the first part that you said. Because
it's a definition, but then it can be anything. The source can be anything.
But what he's not saying is that God is good because God is appealing to outside something. So when he's saying, no, I don't agree with that, all he's saying is that I'm taking the other horn of the dilemma. That's what he's actually saying. And he's couching it in his own sort of language, but that's what he's saying. God is the source of it, which means how, it's arbitrary. How do we establish that what God says is in fact good? And that's when you go with that horn, that's the problem that you encounter.
Acting upon God or limiting God. They're within God's essence. So he's not reaching to something beyond himself. This is coming from him still.
See, I'll have this discussion with Yusuf, and then all we need to do with Yusuf is get clear which horn he's taking. And if he says he's not taking either horn, show him that there isn't another way that he can go. There is no other horn. There is no third option, unfortunately, for him, even if he wants to couch in it.
Yeah, but Rob, this is what I see all the time, that they always say this is not in his essence, this is not in his nature, this is not the way that God would do it. And he would, of course, not tell us anything that is not bad. So all they're doing is they're just defining it in there to make it sound palatable to everybody, but it's not. The dilemma has not changed in any way. It's still there. There's still a dichotomy. They just try and get sort of an in the middle position, which doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I also agree. I don't think there's no middle position. And even William Lane Craig, who's much more of an expert than any of these guys, really just takes the first horn and redefines it as something, God's essence. Yeah.
And it doesn't make it arbitrary. And also, when we're talking about morality...
Well, yes, it does, because you'd have to demonstrate how you know that God is good, or indeed, how does God know that God is good? And if all you're going to say is, well, God knows it because his nature is good, it's a circular tautologous argument. All you're saying is God is God. If God equals good and good is God, then God is God. It's that simple.
We're talking about a relationship between beings. Now, God creates everything, and it's only through this creation that you can start to talk about these relations. So even if you were to talk about, that it follows from blah, 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 that this is good because of that reason, the only way that these reasons were even able to manifest was because God created everything in the first place. So he created all of the component parts which make one thing lead to another. So
yeah, but an evil demon could have done the same thing posing as God. So that's of no relevance. What you're just saying now is irrelevant to the Euthyphro dilemma.
Even then, God is still responsible for that morality. It doesn't follow that it's arbitrary because it can follow from his knowledge, his wisdom.
Yeah, but all you're saying is that God is God.
That's your definition. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a tautology, right? I mean, it's clear. Even the chat recognizes that, right?
Which isn't a separate entity from God. It's not independent from him, but it's contained within his divine essence.
Yeah. So, I think it's a penny drop more.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a sophistry type of thing to say, well, God is good. How do you know that? Because it's in his essence. How do you know that? Because his essence is good and it's therefore God. Yeah.
Comment on this, actually. Because you've got to remember who's saying this. These are the Greeks. These believed in Zeus and this and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what they're basically saying is, if you're saying God says it's good, so you do it, they're actually saying man then can create his own laws of God by just saying, yeah, God says this is good. So that's the arbitrary nature. So if someone claims to be speaking on behalf of God, they can do anything they like.
No,
that's exactly what happened. This is what happened. This is why we have in the Quran, don't eat pork. That's exactly what happened. Somebody said, God tells you, don't eat pork. Therefore, you don't eat pork. Because somebody told you that it's God and therefore it's good. So Euthyphro dilemma proven.
Yeah, he's talking about the Greeks and how they made this up because they wanted to make something up. It wasn't that they made it up.
What happens? It's made up.
Yeah, they made it up. Yeah, but.
Right, that's good.
Yeah,
I think we have to. We're looking at it from our theistic mono God, basically. Yeah, not from monotheism, where the clue is in the actual claim, the gods.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So, and it's just dropped for me. I get it now.
It also explains why.
You get it? Okay, next time I speak to you, I'm going to put it to you and we'll see if you get it. I don't think you get it at all, but we'll see. It's been explained okay. I mean, I don't think he's given good arguments to not accept it, but I think Yusuf has kind of explained it well enough that somebody can understand it.
Yes.
If this
the
kind of example stem...
His conclusion
yeah.
The way he's explained it is correct.
Yeah, his conclusion is tautology. That's unhelpful, circular argument. That doesn't work.
From a polytheistic society, why that a lot of the issues generally imply an anthropomorphism, or generally apply, that morality as being some sort of separate entity from the creator.
Did you get that?
Which is...
Yusuf is now refuting what Hamza says, and Hamza is nodding.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention for a second. I was looking at the chat there and I was listening in, so...
It was interesting because Yusuf just told Hamza, no, you're wrong. Just because it says God or gods, it refers to the singular God as well. And Hamza is still nodding away, thinking that he's confirming what he just said, but ways
Let's just hear that again.
Mono God, basically, yeah? Not from monotheism, where the clue is in the actual claim, the gods.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So,
and it's just dropped for me. I get it now. I get
it. It also explains why, if this kind of example stemmed from a polytheistic society, why that a lot of the issues generally imply an anthropomorphism, or generally apply, that morality as being some sort of separate entity from the creator, which is, I think, a false move to make. But it's also interesting as well, because one of the problems with polytheism is that there is always a massive diversity in the way that the gods act. And this is something Socrates, funnily enough, also, I may mention this in the essay that I'm doing for Sapiens Institute, Imran will be aware of it because he's read it, that there's an issue that if the gods act in very contrary ways, so you've got examples of gods stealing, raping, doing very problematic behaviors. If the gods are a basis for morality, because for the ancient Greeks especially, that's what the epic tales were about. That people did draw their morality from these poems, from these stories about their gods. And Socrates recognized that this was an issue because then anything can be justified. And so he even promoted to basically censor the religion of the polytheists, to prevent them from saying unjust things about God. And even kind of...
Okay, this has gone way off track now from the Youth of the Dilemma. So, yeah, he's gone off onto the Greek gods as if anybody cares about that. My question to him or anybody else is, how is it that you could demonstrate that a pantheon of gods that are in perfect harmony with another cannot exist or cannot bring about reality as we understand it, or whatever the case is? We're not talking about you're being uncharitable in the sense of like you're appealing to the Greek gods who are fighting, but what about a set of gods like from the Green Lantern? I appeal to those guys who are sitting there. I don't know if they're called the Eternals or whatever their name is, and they're in harmony. Each of them has a particular role to play, and they're in harmony with each other. So, what prevents that from being the case?
Okay, this is interesting. I don't know if you got this. Hang on, let me just do this. Here. No, Jesus, I missed it.
Sorry, what are you doing?
Yeah, this is what I'm looking for.
Oh, if you can copy that somehow, stops. If Dave, I'm not seeing that at the moment. There's an advanced class on the problems in the dilemma. Okay, well, that'll be good to have a look at. So, yeah, if we can screenshot that or grab that. Dave, maybe you can pop that into the gin and tonic. If Dave can, hang on, stops. If Dave can pop it into Discord, into gin and tonic Discord in general, it'll pop up there, or message me directly, Dave. I'll have a look at that. That'll be great.
He often talks and reasons towards a sort of monotheism, despite also sometimes using polytheistic language. So it was very interesting. And he kind of, he really points out this problem with polytheism, and it's not just something that was present with the Greeks.
Right, 2 minutes up, mate. Next time.
Same problem with the,
that was
okay, bro. That's really profound.
We can do a stream on this, bro. Honestly, this is.
I think we should. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's nice to go out of the Christian streams. There's a bit of different material, challenging other beliefs and explaining ours a little bit. So, mashallah, that's awesome.
We're just showing us one string to our bow, isn't it?
We can
do a stream with Christians. We can do a stream with atheists, man. Alhamdulillah, we have the truth. Whatever you guys, we can deal with your isms.
Please click on this link below. This is Yusuf's channel, mashallah. It's really good.
Also,
really good. Next level.
Everyone here has got a channel now, haven't they, independently?
Oh, yeah.
So dive into all of them. I think I've made a channel as well. So
if you don't know my channel, there we go. Hey,
I think Imran's channel's older than me. That's fine.
Okay, I think they're pretty much done now. I just want to see if anybody else is going to say anything for some reason.
No, it's just our personal blogs, so to speak, I would say.
Just to offer that personal touch, because we've all got our styles.
Abbas's is new, though, isn't it?
What's that?
Abbas's channel is a new one, isn't it?
Conversation Islam.
Yeah.
So it's really about try to sort of getting the arguments out in different styles, so that people that want to sort of have different ways of looking at the arguments, they can see them. Because sometimes the arguments get long streams. And inshallah, it's going to be allowing people, when they're searching for things, lots of different hits that they can go to find the answers. So the idea is that overall we're going to increase the presence, inshallah, of responses to things that people are searching about, and I think it will benefit everyone, inshallah. And obviously EFDawah, it will remain EFDawah, inshallah. We'll always be here, inshallah.
People incline to different personalities, don't they? So sometimes you might say the same thing 10 times, but something's much more absorbable but from one particular character for one kind of person.
Yeah, some people like the classiness and the calmness of Abbas. Some people want the...
Some people like the Hamza.
Some people like some people like the cooking programs.
They love watching me eat. They keep asking me why you're not eating anything.
I was the best cook. I was the best cook out of everyone, I think.
I think
Got it?
All right, guys. Should we say salam to everyone? Assalamu alaikum.
All right, guys, that brings it to a close, I think. That was a long one. Thank you so much, Stops, for sticking by and going through 3 parts to this whole thing. I appreciate the time and effort that you've put in, and your company, of course, and your views on it as well. So a couple of things we can bring up for Gin and Tonic, at least. Your closing thoughts on this whole thing, this whole stream and so on.
Incredibly painful. It shows that the level of, I don't know, how should I put it? I don't want to be, arrogant, condescending, and insulting, and all these things. I just feel that intellectually there is nothing there. It's grasping at straws. It's trying to find things that they can respond with without having a coherent, compelling way of doing so. It's like somebody is like, I don't know, it's like somebody coming in a bobby car to a Formula One race. And they can't do that. They don't have the equipment. Their brains are somehow affected by this Islam virus that prohibits them from using rational, logical, reasonable thinking, or in this critical thinking, which I think is most important. They don't have this, and because they don't have this, they cannot, respond during a discussion like this, or they simply can't. I see this again and again, that they're going off track, that they misrepresent, that they misunderstand, and they're talking about totally different things. They simply do not understand what this is, what is going on. I see Islam collapsing fast and in a horrible way, and they're pretending like it's growing, and we just need to talk around it a little bit, and that they don't realize that it's getting to a stage where they cannot stop it anymore. If I see how many Muslims are leaving Islam, how many people are being, led away, and they're saying, okay, I cannot believe this anymore. The morality in Islam is so horrific, I cannot go and believe this anymore. And Muslims are talking about Euthyphro dilemma as though this is some sort of a trivial thing. It's not. It's fundamental. These are the things that are killing Islam, and they don't see it. So I'm flabbergasted that people like this do this, and I can't understand that there are not more intellectual Muslims who go to these people and say, listen, you guys, shut the fuck up. You're damaging Islam more than you're helping. They don't see it.
Yeah, I think for me the first part was, there wasn't anything of substance that I picked up on in the first part. On my part, there were a couple of things that I could have definitely done better, in the sense of going in with the things that I was more interested in talking about, and it got a little bit sidelined. I did okay. It wasn't too bad. I picked up on the things that I needed to. One can always use hindsight and go this, that, and the other that was better, but it wasn't too bad. It was a shame that I never got to do the objective morality side. That would have been, I think, much more of a strong critique. But I think, for me, again, the only person that I took from that I'd want to have another conversation with is Yusuf. I think he's mistaken on a number of issues, but I think he's somebody that you can have a much more interesting discussion with, somebody who's charitable, who will listen, who will put forward his position, and he's not necessarily trying to impress the audience, which I think the other interlocutors are very practiced at doing. They've got used to it. They're all seen by some Muslims as being, people to view, and so they have a particular view of, like somebody said in the chat, they're not wanting to lose, so they've got various tactics around this, and I think that isn't always helpful. So again, I agree with Stops in the sense that I didn't hear anything that was of any of any substance that I went, that's really good, or that's something I've got to think about, or anything like that. I think, there was a lot of errors from their point. I think hopefully we've pointed a lot of those out, and hopefully people have got something from this, and we'll continue to do it. So if you find any other videos, there's a couple more in the pipeline that we want to do. So when we have a chance, we'll do that. Please join us tomorrow, Friday, every Friday, 8 p.m. UK time, the Gin and Tonic Show. That's the other channel. So if you type in Gin, J-I-N Tonic, you will find the other show, and we do that every single Friday. So look forward to that. And again, thank you very much, Stops. Thank you for everybody viewing. If you guys want to talk to us, we can pop onto the Discord server. I'm popping the link now. We go on there for a very short time. If you join that link, you can come and talk to us off recording. It's a private server. Nothing's recorded there. We can have a conversation. You don't have to feel nervous about it, and you're more than welcome to come and have a conversation there. We keep offering. So the person that says, can I talk? Yes, please join that link there. You can come and join us there. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you, good night, and until we come back possibly next week, take care, look after yourselves.
Rob, just explain. If you go there, you need to go to this orange symbol. Hang on, let me just put this. You need to look for this symbol that is on the top right-hand corner that I put there now. This is what you need to look for. And there you need to click on the, was it after chat? After show voice server. Because sometimes it's a little bit confusing, because they have the type chat only, and they have the voice part. So you need to go and click on the voice part so that you can actually be integrated into the discussion. Now, people like Steve Beck will automatically say no thank you, because as soon as it gets to actually saying something, they will run away and hide, and then hide behind mommy and complain and whine, these nasty atheists. But if you want to have a real discussion, you're welcome to go there. It's not recorded. Whatever you want to, you can say there. Yeah, on that note, thanks very much. We'll pop in there for a short while. Not very long. It's getting a bit late now. And otherwise, we'll see you on the next stream, hopefully next week, or otherwise tomorrow on the Gin and Tonic Show. Thank you and good night. Bye-bye.